Sword of Coming Chapter 11:14. There is a bright moon on the sea. The word xing is really wonderful and has an endless aftertaste. Even if it is a sword fairy who uses the method of imagining, no matter how fast the sword is, it is definitely not as good as the Sanshan talisman that crosses continents casually, and it is also not as good as that night sailing ship. A misty Dharma figure flitted across thousands of islands in the sea. Above the sea, the majestic sword energy broke through countless seas of clouds, and Qingying opened up extremely long roads in the clouds. Occasionally, a waterborne looked up in horror, only to see the cyan sword light flashing away, flickering on and off, and after a while, there was a series of deafening thunder, resounding in the lonely sea and sky. Occasionally, the sword fairy lowered Yujian's figure, and his sword energy cut through the waves. He passed a certain island hanging over seas, and the emerald green in the mountains leaned to one side, rustling. Passing through an unknown fairy house on the sea, there are row upon row of gorgeous buildings and bright lights. The cyan figure that was about to hit the island in a straight line was divided into dozens of sword lights in an instant, high and low, just bypassing the ancestral mountain. The radiant sword light, which was separated from the mountain, dragged out dazzling trails in the air, radiant with brilliance, and recondensed into a line on the sea more than 100 miles away. During the interval between breath adjustment and breathing, the light of the sword slowed down, and Qin Pingan showed his figure, drawing a half-arc. His green shirt floated on the sea, striding on the waves, his sleeves fluttering, full of sea breeze. Wanting to meet a ferryboat in the vast sea, or a chi refiner who travels far away with the wind, is tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. Tonight, Qin Pingan really met one. This man was driving a talisman boat, slowly following a magical cloud shining under the moon, and the young monk threw his pole into the sea of clouds. Qin Pingan stopped at the edge of the sea of colorful clouds. The leisurely young fishing man raised his eyes and asked in the elegant words of Nan Pasuajo, "Who is it?" Qin Pingan smiled in the most mellow and authentic Najo dialect. "The land who went out to sea to visit the gods." The young man twisted his wrist, pulled out the rod and scattered the bait. Ripples burst into the sea of colorful clouds, pulled back the fishing line, and rubbed a piece of secret again. Put the bait on the hook, throw the rod once and the wind roars. The golden fishing line, which is so tiny and undetectable, is more than 100 feet long. The young man smiled. "A fellow?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "The master of this way is not weaker than others." The young man couldn't help laughing and didn't speak a word, while the suspicious-looking strange man in blue shirt just stood there, his figure fluttering with the clouds, and he looked at it patiently for half an hour. The young man had no choice but to say, "I often sit for tens of years and I may not be able to catch a fish once. If you wait for me to catch a colorful winged crested fish before leaving, I'm afraid you will be disappointed." Qin Ping raised his chin and asked, "Show me the fish basket?" A bamboo fish basket was tied to the bow, which disappeared into the clouds. "The rank is not bad, it is clearly a Dragon King basket on the mountain." The young man smiled and said, looking at no one around, "Are you sure that I don't have a Taoist protector, that you're bullying me, that I'm not of a high level, and that you plan to kill people and rob me?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist is Da? Water from South Pazuo continent?" The young man with an ancient jade seal hanging from his waist frowned and said nothing. Did this person come prepared? Want both the Dragon King basket and this ancestral token? Today's Kai Yishio has a lot of appetite. It couldn't be because I bumped into a wild remnant hiding in the sea, right? Very good. Small fish don't eat big fish. Let me weigh this person's weight. Long Cheng, the originator of Da? Shui, who is also the young master, once obtained an ancient stone box protected by A and Manin? Shui. There were 5 seals in the box. You Confucian temple. Long Cheng meticulously refined the jade seal on that side was 300 years old, and it has become the treasure of Da? At this moment, it is hanging on the waist of the young monk. The young man put away his fishing rod, stood up and reported his identity. Da? Shui Caiji Prefecture, Lu Xiang. Please tell me the name of your fellow Taoist and teach you the Dharma. Qin Ping waved his hand, indicating that he had no intention of discussing Taoism, and said with a smile, "I am very familiar with Yuan Qingshu." The young man asked with a smile, "Does Uncle Yuan know you well?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Familiar too." Lu Xiang narrowed his eyes and said, "Why don't you be more straightforward and say that there is a no-things sign above your shop, with the phrase this place should know that I, Yuan Qingshu, is a sword fairy?" I never thought that the guy was really shameless, so he nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist helped me say what I wanted to say." Luckily Lu Xiang is not weak in raising energy, otherwise I would have yelled at him. I was fishing in the South China Sea, which is far away from Aquarius continent, and when I met a passerby, he said that he was the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Did you think that xianxia was stupid because of money, or did you think Lu Xiang were stupid? Chen Pinggan said, Li Kai once returned a broken Yangjian gourd to Da? Shui. Lu Xiang was puzzled. How did this guy know such a secret inside story? The Qin Pinggan said, Yuan Jianxian is addicted to wine. He once joked with Gao Kuei at the top of the city that he used raised sword gourds to store wine, and used the name of a big demon to hide the current wine and vegetables. The taste is endless, the most delicious. Lu Xiang asked, Who are you? Damn, if you are really that young hermit official, I will take your surname. In short, Lu Xiang just didn't believe that the person in green shirt in front of him happened to be the Qin Jianxian who he was thinking about. There was no such a coincidence in the world. Besides, Li Kai and other sword celestials who have been visiting Da? J. This Lu Xiang, through various mountain rumors and gossip, verified the statement of some intercontinental ferry stewards and captains that the young hermit official was indeed vigorous and resolute. The most important thing is that they all swear that the young sword fairy is not ordinary handsome, and outsiders can recognize his unusualness at a glance. Lu Xiang took a closer look. The man in front of him, with a hosta on his head, a green shirt, long gown and cloth shoes in terms of appearance, can only be regarded as Zhou Zheng in terms of demeanor. Silly, he stood there and watched himself fishing for half an hour. It must not be Chen Pinggan. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, Friends of Taoism are vulgar, don't you respect your appearance? Lu Xiang held back for a long time and asked tentatively, Fellow Taoist, did you use the immortal family disguise technique? Chen Pinggan was speechless for a moment. If it's not a sword repair, it's just difficult to talk about. After all, Lu Xiang was lucky and wanted to chat a few words, but saw the man in the blue shirt wave his sleeves, and in an instant, a sea of colorful clouds surged violently, and several fishes jumped out of the clouds by themselves and jumped into the talisman boat. The next moment, the green shirt was gone and Lu Xiang lingered in his ear. Daoist friends returned home, just said that they caught it by themselves, so there is no need to go to the Nanhai fish market to buy it. Lu Xiang was in a daze. Although he was still unable to determine the identity of the other party, they were people of the same path, so they must be right. Then at the border between the South China Sea and the East China Sea, Qin Pinggan suddenly stopped and looked down at a bright moon in the sea. There was an old Taoist priest in purple clothes with a gourd on his back, slowly rising from the bright moon. It was a phantom that Yu Xian used supernatural powers to appear in the world. Qin Ping slapped the boss. The younger generation has met Yu Laoren. Yu Xian returned the salute with a smile. You don't need to be too polite, Daoist Qin. Qin Ping asked with a smile. Are you worried that the younger generation will mislead the younger generation? Yu Xian waved his hands and said, How is that possible? The poor way's vision of seeing people, and the preaching skills of fellow Taoists are the best in the world. That's what I said, but after all, it was a bit shocking for a person in the fairyland to dare to speak of the method of ascension. At that time, Bai Jing would have mistakenly thought that his mountain master was drunk and talking drunk. Yu Xian was naturally still a little worried. Walking hand in hand on the sea covered with moonlight like snow-white fish scales, knowing the old man's worries, Qin Pinggan carefully said his words and said slowly, This closed-door practice, the real years that Taoist Ding needs to pass away, are 10 years short. Years as long as 100 years. Yu Xian silently twisted his beard. You have to figure it out. With Taoist Ding's monastic aptitude, it is not impossible for him to ascend the Tao within 200 to 300 years. Qin Pinggan said to himself, It's not that it can't take longer, but it's meaningless. Yu Xian finally couldn't help but asked, How do you say? Qin Ping smiled and said, Don't you say that there is a jiazi in the mountain, and it has been 1,000 years in the world? How can the imaginary age of a cultivator be compared with the first year of a common man at the bottom of the mountain? Yu Xian became nervous and tentatively said, Qin Daoist Ding is a poor Taoist. The best seedling under the sect, even if the jade is not perfect, you have to have a degree, right? How about revealing the details to a bystander like Pindao? The so-called virtual years old, how old is it? Qin Ping just gave a vague answer. The shortest is 10,000 years and the longest is 100 million years. Yu Xian was stunned. Half true and half false. Really, it is Qin Daoyu's method that is really unimaginable, ingenious, and thought of something that no one has ever thought of. False, I am still worried about Daoist Ding drifting with the tide in the long river of time, spending too much time, and a Taoist heart can't survive. Qin Pinggan smiled and said, Those who see the true self in the chaos can prove the Tao outside the Tao and ascend. Yu Xian asked, "Can you explain it carefully?" Qin Ping shook his head and said, "If you don't want to, you really can't." Yu Xian stretched out his hand and grabbed Qin Pinggan's arm. "It's only been a few days since we saw each other, and now Daoist Chen is separated. We were at the top of Jilin Peak before and we talked very sincerely. Dao Chen, you still owe me 500 coins of gold and fine copper. It's rare for the poor to take a trip to Howren." Qin Ping said helplessly, "In the future I will regularly inform seniors about the progress of Daoist Ding's practice." "Exactly." Yu Xian nodded and said, "That's fine. There is a surprise from time to time, and it's more worth looking forward to than a one-shot deal." Qin Pinggan thought for a while and gave an obscure so-called answer. "The method of ascension that I have figured out must first seek self-proof, then build a bridge of longevity and finally seek the way outside." Yu Xian chewed for a while. "It's worthwhile for the poor to have just heard this talk." Qin Pinggan began to change the subject and asked, "Senior, is there anything else you want to say here?" Yu Xian hummed and stretched out his fingers to the distance. "I made a temporary calculation earlier, and there will be a reunion in the near future. It can be said to be related to you, of course, it can have nothing to do with it, it depends on whether you are willing to swim in the muddy water." Qin Pingyan guessed the general reason and with a decision in his heart, he asked a digression, "Why has there never been a mountain sitting on the Chuanjiao mountain in Fuyao Island? Whether it was officially established by the imperial court, or the heroic spirits built their own temples, good like never before in history." Yu Xian hesitated for a moment and said with a smile, "The mountains and rivers are full of spirits, they are either gods or immortals. There are always those who like to be pure when they practice supernatural powers or immortals in the mountains." The old man put away the illusion of the moon phase, while Qin Pinggan continued to swim far away on the sea with his sword. A few Taoist priests who teach the classics work as free masters in Jumping Fish Mountain together, and help the monks carefully selected by the 8 Great Li dynasty to teach some secrets that do not involve the sect and do not violate the taboos on the mountain superficial way. It's not a difficult task, but these 4 Taoist priests with different ancestors, they don't see each other when they look up and down every day. As time goes by, they naturally get to know each other better. It is also in Taoyushan where the boxing is taught in the martial arts field, and the place of preaching here is in an empty hall. There are a few futons on the ground which are said to be purchased from Sanlang Temple in Luzhou, Beiju with a lot of money. After Bai Feng and the others have all talked about their situation, but Xiangtong is the only one who refuses to say a word. At that time even Shui Jisue, the heavenly ruler with the highest realm and seniority, made no secret of it, saying that he was led by Qin Shanju into a 9-story glazed pagoda, with an extra broom in his hand, and we would sweep the pagoda together every day. Shui Jisue from the bottom. After sweeping, Qin Pinggan began to sweep the tower from the top floor. Whenever Shui Jisue chose to sweep from the top floor, Qin Ping would sweep from the first floor again. Today he was chased by Liang Chaoguan again. Xiangtong was really annoyed by them, so he squeezed out 2 words between his teeth: "Walk around." It's really not that Xiangtong is hypocritical, it's really unbearable to look back on the past. Every time he thinks about it, Xiangtong can't help but shed tears of bitterness for himself. It turned out that because of his high-level, strange methods and confusion, he insisted on dragging Xiangtong through thousands of mountains and rivers together, spending about 100 years of illusory time. The surname Qin always likes to give him difficult problems which makes him lose his whole body of Taoism, and there is no aura in the world, but he wants to force him to be a beggar who fled from the country, and insists on relying on his ability to rely on a broken bowl. Only the gentry on the wealthy side can pass the test. Having worked as a fast-moving subordinate in the county government for many years, relying on with a little, ancestral 3-legged cat handle, but every day to arrest those gangsters who fly around the walls casually, and wipe out some water bandits, he was almost hacked to death several times. The imperial list of the capital announces the good news as an errand runner begging for a few bounties from the gentry of Xinka Jinshi, finally relying on his clever legs and feet. He knows how to climb over the wall and take shortcuts, and when he gets the money he may even be blocked in the alley by a few colleagues after punching and kicking. The guy would jump out and say a few nasty words like, in broad daylight, under the feet of the emperor, "Don't be too arrogant," scaring away those bastards, and then he put his arms around his chest and leaned against the wall, smiling and looking at the blue-nosed face. The swollen self staggered to his feet. Qin Pinggan even asked him to do the river and lake work of crushing boulders in the chest in the downtown area of the thoroughfare or at the water transport dock. But that guy has already started to shout loudly, selling dolly pills. Occasionally there are some leisurely mountain trips. The guy said that it was a combination of work and rest, and he was afraid that his Taoism would collapse, and it would be difficult to explain to fellow Taoists in the future. Wearing straw sandals and carrying a basket on the back of the mountain to collect herbs together, and visiting the immortals to enjoy the scenery, the guy was full of nonsense and nonsense. Some doggerel poems that neither understand the allusions nor match the rhythm of the rhyme. Xianxiang Tanger only Chin Doctor. Once in the capital of the dynasty, he took over a boot shop whose business was sluggish. How could Xiangtong know this? So he was blinded. In the end, under the guidance of Chen, Xiangtong sold a list of officials by the way. Really making money up. Xiangtong has also been a silversmith who steals, rapes and plays tricks. Not only is he a businessman full of money, but Xiangtong who thinks he has a bottom line in life is about to turn against that guy directly. However, they also opened a good incense and candle shop outside a certain temple. Neither making money nor losing money, Xiangtong is neither busy nor idle every day, but is relatively calm. Liang Chaoguan saw that the famously arrogant Xiangtong acted like a gourd again, and asked suspiciously, Xiangtong, since you hate Qin Shanzhu so much, why did you stay? Once you leave, wouldn't it be out of sight? Don't worry. Xiangtong was silent for a moment, then said sullenly, stay here and sharpen your Dao heart. Liang Chaoguan patted Xiangtong on the shoulder, laughed and said, facing the difficulties ascending to the climate. Xiangtong glanced sideways at Liang Chaoguan who was close to him, and the latter withdrew his palm resentfully. Only then did Xiangtong ask, what level of aptitude do these children belong to among the youngest generation of Taoist priests in our Taofu mountain? Bai Feng staggered her hands and fingers, straightened her waist and stretched her waist. She was really too lazy to answer such an idiotic but sweet question. Liang Chaoguan said with a smile, after all, it is the fairy seedlings selected by the Dali Song family with the power of the whole country. It is not difficult to exchange them with us and become the direct disciples of the members of the ancestors of the peaks. One or two with the best qualifications, better luck, enter after gaining the Dharma eye of a certain patriarch, earning his disciples and cultivating Taoism for 100 years, maybe he is the second Libiu of the Feixin Palace on a certain peak? Libiu was helpless. Although he was in Feixin Palace, Liang Chaoguan was in Iho Peak of Taofu Mountain in his ancestral court. There are 4 sects in one mountain and countless Taoist priests. Any intersection, but I have heard about Liang Chaoguan for a long time. After all, he is a genius who went to Yunmeng Cave to practice with his real skills. In addition to cultivating Taoism, according to the Zongman's internal reports and some rumors, Liang Chaoguan is a very serious Taoist priest. Law but also to practice the sword, it seems that there is no such words to escape. The girl in the sable hat checked the progress of those little melon skins. She looked displeased, frowned, and was not very satisfied. She clearly taught the Taoist formula seriously, and explained every step carefully. Why is it still useless? He slammed around like a fly, but he just cursed a few times, but it seemed that his preaching skills were not good enough. Xiago insisted on a few words of encouragement, intending to let a certain general priest teach it several times according to the outline he made. Stupid, maybe the negative and the negative can be positive, but it will have a miraculous effect? Xiago glanced at Bai Feng's chest. The ermine hat girl didn't say anything, just shook her head, sighed and left. Liang Chaoguan lowered his voice and asked, Miss Xie, what do you mean? Libiu dare not express his opinion on this kind of issue. Xiangtong said bluntly, I find it cumbersome. Lu Biu said, Miss Xie is not easy. Liang Chaoguan echoed, unfathomable. Bai Feng sneered and said, drink the wine and understand. Xiang Tong, who was born in Hebei Peak, had the highest realm and in fact his vision was also the highest. He hesitated to speak but still didn't express his conjecture. Xiego, who looks like a girl, is very likely to be a swordsman whose swordsmanship is far superior to me, yes. The second enshrinement of Luo Bashan, Xiangtong firmly believed in her so-called cutting off the old throne. I heard that she also has a Taoist companion called Xiaoma. If there is no accident, she will also be a sword fairy. Liang Chaoguan clasped the back of his head with his hands and sighed, I really don't know how Mr. Qin gathered them together. Except for Zhongtu Shenzhou, each continent is either a nominal Taoist master like Tianjun Qizhen and Xiashi, or a mountain leader like Jinghao with infinite scenery. But if you really want to calculate the size of the territory, the vastness of the 4 seas outside of Jiuzhou is far from being comparable to the mountains and rivers of a certain continent. In addition to the high-ranking and powerful Mrs. Dan Dan who is in charge of land and water transportation, the new lord of the 4 seas, Zhu, the true dragon king of the East China Sea, Li Yeho the of the South China Sea, Jiaoyue, Lu Roshi Biyuan of the West Sea and Wei Tianting the of the North Sea, Hongyun. The undersea mansion of Mr. Donghai. Recently, the purple air in the mansion is rising, and the weather is grand, forming a huge vortex on the sea surface. The generals and soldiers of the water mansion have to patrol around to enforce martial law. Unless they hold a special certificate issued by the inspection department, everything has nothing to do with others and is unreliable. Close. Today there are 24 divisions set up within the jurisdiction of the water mansion, dotted all over the place, like the imperial city of a secular dynasty, occupying a boundary of thousands of miles, guarding this central Miyagi. Outside the 9-foot-tall vermilion lacquer gate in the blue jade square, an old man in a green shirt with his hands behind his back appeared out of nowhere. It's resplendent and majestic, it can scare people. A general in golden armor holding an iron spear lightly poked the ground with the bottom of the spear, and asked in a deep voice, "Who is coming? Please tell us your identity quickly." The old man turned a deaf ear to it and just looked up at the uneven plaques. Another high-ranking of the water mansion came to the door, followed by a group of elite warriors with clanking iron armor. The uninvited guest who didn't know how to cross the many passes still didn't look at the group of priests and soldiers of the water palace. The general stretched out his hand to hold the handle of the knife and reminded, "It is a felony to trespass on the water palace." The old man looked away, bored, yawned and said with a smile, "I have to suppress the realm so as not to scare you to death, it is very hard." Saber God General took a step forward. "You're still playing tricks. If you don't report your name, don't blame Ben General for taking you to the water prison." The old man in green shirt said, "Okay, I have nothing to talk to you guys, let that Wang Zhu get out and meet the old man. The general is going to activate the water mansion formation, and mobilize one of the water veins to smash at this old fellow who speaks out loud." As a result, the high-ranking general was horrified to find that the water vein belonging to one of the water mansion formations was completely out of control. The old man said to himself, "That's right, how dare she show up in front of me?" A torrential rain, the rain that splits into the four seas, is not uncommon. The little girl's film luck is good, let her take the first step and get away with it. Indeed, in terms of luck, compared with this evil dragon who survived the catastrophe, how many Liyihis are different? Dominant. So she dared not see me even more. A priestess from the etiquette department hurried over with a respectful expression, but she hesitated to speak. How to address each other is really difficult. The one who came was Qin Qinglu, the dragon slayer. The old man said, "Hey, finally there is someone who is not blind." The chief of the etiquette department bestowed a blessing. "I have seen Qin Xianjun." Qin Qinglu nodded and said with a smile, "Wang Zhu has made up his mind not to go out to entertain guests?" The female officer looked embarrassed. Just now, King Zhu of Water made a decree, roughly meaning to thank guests behind closed doors today. Qin Qinglu sneered, "I'm scared out of my wits." Some Shuefu generals who are determined to be the master and humiliate their ministers, even if they have already guessed the identity of the old man in green clothes, they still want to fight him. Qin Qinglu moved forward, together with the female official of the Department of Rituals. All the generals and soldiers of the Water Palace couldn't help themselves. No matter how they struggled, they still had to kneel on the ground. As if the way of heaven is slowly pressing down on the top, they can't help but stand still. Qin Qinglu took every step. In a large hall of the water mansion, the Water King Zhu, who was originally sitting on the dragon chair, had a distorted face, pale and colorless, and his hands that were tightly covering the handle of the chair began to tremble. When Qin Qinglu entered the water mansion and got closer and closer to the main hall, Wang Zhu, who had reached the 14th realm, still didn't even dare to think of leaving the dragon chair. When Qin Qinglu was strolling in the courtyard, he came to the threshold of the main hall. Inside the main hall, Zhu, the king of the 14th realm, no longer has a human form, but a giant snow-white dragon is entrenched. The gigantic body of a real dragon, even though it tried its best to curl up, still occupied half of the wide and deep hall. Qin Qinglu still had his hands behind his back, his expression was as usual, but there was a bit more irony in his eyes. He raised one foot, stepped on the threshold and said, slightly stronger than before, "Just hiding, not running." The snow-white dragon slowly raised its head to a height of more than 10 feet. It was just such a small movement, which seemed to consume all its energy. It's staring at that. Butcher. Blood feud, but that's all. Qin Qinglu smiled and said, "Aren't you desperate? You're already in the 14th realm, but after seeing me, you find it so difficult for you to even raise your head? After a sliver of hope is shattered, it's probably true despair." Wang Zhu was in a daze, maintaining his true spirit, and said hoarsely, "If you kill me, you will also fall." Confucian temple rules? It is destined to be unable to stop this dragon slayer. Moreover, Wang Zhu would never beg for mercy with the Confucian temple. Qin Qinglu sneered and said, "The world today is different from the past and there is still a lack of real dragons? After killing one Wang Zhu, there will naturally be a second one to make up for it. Some are busy." In the battle of killing the dragon 3,000 years ago, there were no real dragons in the world. A Lizhu cave was created out of thin air. Qin Qinglu retired and disappeared without a trace. But even if he didn't show up again for 3,000 years, there is still no dragon species in the world who dares to cross the Thunder Pool. I was just passing by and came here as a guest, but what you said is not pleasant. Qin Qinglu smiled and said, "Then take this head of yours and try to sharpen the edge of a long sword that has been sharpened for 3,000 years? The pair of golden eyes of this real snow-white dragon showed obvious hesitation, and the two dragon whiskers swayed slowly, rippling with bursts of pure golden light. Qin Qinglu has an unknown Taoist name, Qingzhu. This dragon slayer possessed a more concealed single-word flying sword. But it wasn't like this from the very beginning, but the sword cultivator used battle to nourish the battle, tempered the sword edge and polished it out bit by bit. Fijian's natal supernatural power is just one word. Ka. Qin Qinglu stretched out his hand to grab it, and the infinite sea water in the boundary of Shuefu dried up in an instant, and finally condensed into a long blue sword. Standing up the long sword, Qin Qinglu put his fingers together, flicked it lightly, the blade vibrated and trembled endlessly. Wang Zhu was already very reluctant to resist the aura that was like the coercion of heaven, but she absolutely refused to kill her, raised her claws and pressed heavily on the ground of the hall. Qin Qinglu shook his head. "You guys are in the new 14th realm, you are so weak that it is ridiculous." Wang Zhu was so suppressed that he lost his real body and regained his human form, bleeding from his 7 orifices, curled up on the dragon chair. Just at this moment, Qin Qinglu was about to step over the threshold and bestow the sword on that poor fellow, when he suddenly stopped and cursed, "Old man, you likes to be troublesome." It turned out that there was a middle-aged man beside him, who also looked like a Confucian scholar in green shirt. It was Qin Pingon. Qin Qinglu snorted, "Haven't the contract between you two been terminated?" Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. "Unknowingly, I formed the contract passively, and when I came back to my senses, I took the initiative to terminate the contract." Qin Qinglu squinted at the young mountain master and said, "Young man with Ning Yao as a Taoist companion, are you still not satisfied? Eating what's in your mouth and thinking about what's in the pot, isn't it good?" Qin Pingon didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was all about what? Want to save her? How to save her? A little nascent soul who just jumped over the fairyland on the first floor of Yupu, dares to show up here? Qin Qinglu turned around and casually shook the long sword in his hand. "Aren't we going to talk about the realm apart from the realm?" Qin Ping glanced at Wang Zhu, who was sitting on the dragon chair in the room. Wang Zhu's face was frosty and he didn't appreciate it. Holding the sword in one hand, Qin Qinglu took a step towards Qin Pingon, and said with a smile, "I don't understand, am very curious, how can you stop me just because we are both surnamed Qin?" Qin Ping made a bow and said, "Boldly beg Senior to withdraw his sword." Wang Zhuping was furious for no reason and screamed, "Don't beg him. When you were young you asked for help, when you were young you asked for help, and now you still ask for help. My Wang Zhu is already in the 14th realm, and the luck of the dragons in the world is condensed in me. Since life and death are conceded, don't you need to meddle in your own business?" Qin Ping squinted at the hall and said angrily, "Shut up, you." Wang Zhu trembled with anger. Qin Qinglu reminded with a smile, "Qin Ping, think it over, today is my enemy, the price is not small, and the sequelae are even greater." Qin Ping's eyes were firm and he said slowly, "About Wang Zhu, Mr. Qi has something to entrust. I need to be her guardian at least once. At least from the current point of view, Wang Zhu, who left Lizhu Dongtian, did not take any act of arrogance. There is no need to hand over the sword to kill the dragon." "Oh." Qin Qinglu twitched the corners of his mouth. "Qi Jingchun told you personally?" Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "Mr. Qi doesn't need to say it." Qin Qinglu smiled and said, "The immortal realm, it's too useless. Why don't you call the old scholar to come over and make the paste? I also have a suggestion, it's best to bring Li Sheng with you." Qin Pingon was silent. Qin Qinglu waited patiently for a moment, then sneered, "How can a person live such a pitiful life?" Shaking his head, Qin Qinglius' wrist trembled, and the long sword was scattered into sea water. "I don't want to bully a junior, just treat it as if you owe me a sword, questioning in the same realm." Qin Qinglu glanced at Wang Zhu and jokingly said, Twice for saving lives, you can't promise twice with your body? I can help guard the door. Wang Zhu tremblingly raised an arm, lowered his head, and wiped the blood on his face with the sleeve of his dragon robe. Qin Qinglu put his hands behind his back and said, Qin de Jiangxian, walk with me? Qin Pingan nodded. Qin Qinglia's first question was unexpected. In the Great Wall of Sword Qi, has Qin Qing ever commented on the level of swordsmanship? Qin Pingan said truthfully, the boss sword fairy never mentioned senior. Qin Qinglu rubbed his chin, it really makes people angry. Qin Ping smiled. Qin Pingan asked curiously, I have something to ask, did Zouzi ever target you in the way of cultivation, senior? Qin Qinglu laughed and said, I don't like being nosy when I'm full. Besides, I can't become a pure swordsman at the 15th level, I'm not pure enough. Qin Qinglu changed the question again, I've just mastered water swordsmanship, what do you think is the difference between me and Qin Qingdu? Qin Pingan said, leaving aside the killing power, each has its own merits in the way of swordsmanship. Besides, the gap in swordsmanship is not small. Even if each is perfect, the circle is divided into big and small. Qin Qinglu nodded without saying a word but turned around. In the main hall, Wang Zhu, who had just sat up, turned pale in an instant. Qin Pingan had no choice but to add, Senior said that he was destined not to be able to become a 15th level swordsman. This junior thought it was a self-deprecating statement. The spirit of Qingzhu, who came out of the mountain with his sword and retreated with his sword, would never be so low. Qin Qinglu hummed. Only talk about spirit, not achievement. It's a big truth. Two were speechless, walking side by side. Before Qin Qinglu left this East Sea mansion, he said for no reason, so what if you have reached the peak of the world in practice, but you are the least free? Establishing a religion and calling it an ancestor, you will feel that the world is narrow. After saying these words, Qin Qinglu went to the wild world through a passage to return to the ruins. Qin Ping just wanted to travel far away with Yu Jian, so he continued on his way. Wang Zhu, who had recovered as usual, came to him. After all, he is a 14th realm in his own dojo. Qin Pingan said, I was able to get the opportunity to become a sword holder back then. What I did and thought is not the real key. In the final analysis, it is because of Mr. Qi's trust in me. Wang Zhu pursed his lips. Qin Ping said calmly, whether they are here or not, don't let those who give us hope down. Wang Zhu bit his lip. Qin Ping put his arms around his sleeves, as long as you never disappoint Mr. Qi, I am asking as senior not to use the sword today, and I don't need to ask in the future. Wang Zhu turned to look at this former neighbor and she slowly raised her hand. Qin Pingan moved a few steps sideways in an instant, his expression full of alertness. After all, there are 2 realms behind. But Wang Zhu just narrowed his eyes and stroked his temple hair. Qin Ping tipped his toes, and the sword light left the water mansion like a rainbow. In the peaceful world, the earth is always spring, and the countryside is full of smoke from cooking. Some guests come from the west, and their clothes are still covered with apricot blossom rain. On Luapa Mountain, an old man dressed in a Taoist robe and a gourd scoop around his waist came this day. He was dusty and carried a piano bag. Old immortal Jia just happened to come to drink tea at this table today, and catch up with the Taoist priest Xianhui, who has now been promoted to the head of a mountain. The visitor claimed to be a Lushan Taoist, Hong Chengxian, named Yu Jian. Because I didn't think about mountain climbing, I didn't register with Taoist Xianhui. The old Taoist was more talkative, and said he was good at playing the qin made by Lei Shi. He met an equally talkative old fairy Jia, and they had a good conversation. The old Taoist took off the piano bag and showed his hand. Jia Xing was full of admiration and commented on a sincere sentence from the bottom of his heart. It is true, it is clear, there is no smoke and the meaning is beyond the world. In fact, there are often qi practitioners like Hong Chengxian who pretend to pass by the foot of the mountain. It's just that there are not many people who dare to sit at the table like the old Taoist priest. Hong Chengxian drank tea, hit it off with that old fairy Jia, stepped on the watermelon rind and chatted wherever he went, chatting, just rushing, now talking about his friend. It is considered that his official career has been smooth, and he once served as a minister of the Ministry of Rights of a country. Old immortal Jia sees through but doesn't tell, making friends out of thin air. Hong Chengxian continued, Pindao met him when he was young, when he was the secretary, and he met this arrogant young man who was the third guard. Old immortal Jia asked tentatively, Kijiagwan? Hong Chengxian nodded with a smile and revealed his shortcomings. It is indeed an official from the family. He is the secretary who writes books when he gets on the bus, and what is in his body is the secretary. Jia Sheng stroked his beard and smiled and said, Dao is from a friendly family background, so it's no wonder that his speech and behavior are so elegant and natural. Hong Qingxian continued to tell the story of that friend. After becoming Minister of the Ministry of Rights, he had a suggestion with His Majesty the Emperor that it is a good thing for a ruler in charge of a country and a minister who governs a country to be devout and faithful to the Buddha, but he should not blindly flatter the Buddha. If the blood of the common people is exhausted for the altar, the Buddha, if he has a spirit, would not be willing to make offerings. If one loses the treasury, misses the agricultural work, and wastes the people's power to get the blessing, then the blessing will be greater than the blessing that is prayed for. Practicing Buddhism can cultivate the capital of the next life. Confucianism's cultivation of qi and jiping is to solve today's problems. The second monarch changed his course and began to advocate Taoism, and turned to destroy temples and Buddhas. It was still the old man who had just been conferred the title of Crown Prince in Taibao, who openly opposed the emperor's extermination of Buddhism and worship of Taoism. The reason is that it is wrong to say that today is near, and the next life is far away. Then the next life is far away, today is near, just look at the light of today day. It is also wrong not to look at the afterlife in this body. Some people in the ruling and opposition circles said that he was trying to gain fame and reputation, and that he would not be guaranteed at the end of the day. Only a few people think that he is truly mellow. Speaking of this, the old Taoist raised his withered palm and patted the piano bag on the table lightly. From young to old, we are all close friends, but he became an official, a poor Taoist cultivator, and it is inevitable that he will gradually drift away. No more books, times have changed, old places revisiting, the previous years were blown away by the rain and the wind, the old friend's house was overgrown with weeds, the old wood was thin and tough, and the branches were like tendons. There is only one ancient begonia, which is still graceful and graceful, like a peerless beauty who admires herself alone. Old immortal Jia sighed endlessly and followed up, I don't know how many times, I have passed out drunk in the shadow of flowers. Cui Qingxian picked up the water bowl and said sadly, there is no solution. Jia Xing was not very willing to comment on this matter, so he just picked up the bowl and bumped into Cui Qingxian. At this moment, the young Taoist priest sitting on the bamboo chair suddenly said, there is a solution. Cui Qingxian turned his head and asked with a smile, what's the explanation? Xianhui replied, if you want to be powerless, you will resign from office and retire to the mountains and forests. This kind of high morale and integrity, the family members and grandchildren have seen it, and the government and the people have seen it. They all know that there is still something in the world. Scholars read books in this way, so it is right of. It's really helpless, it's hard to change the situation from turbid to clear, and I have to pretend to be false and join forces with people who don't believe in the same way, but I do my best, mend it in secret, and do a lot of good things that benefit the people in the country, and outsiders scold me as I please. If you scold me, your fame will be ruined once, but you have a clear conscience, so this is also right. Two kinds of things, two people, two hearts, have never failed, and they have really taken root, and will bloom and bear fruit in the hearts of others. They may not be lush, but like that crabapple. Hearing this, the old man thought about it for a moment and sighed, so that's how it is. Taoist Xianhui smiled and said nothing. Sure enough, I can't discuss the details of Taoism in the teaching with others, and speaking these general Taoist language is what I am good at. The last time I made a show for Li Muzhou of the Jingwei Temple, now Xianhui is afraid when he meets a true Taoist priest. It was still hard to muster up the courage to say a few words. Of course, the main reason is that Taoist Xianhui is not worried about saying the wrong thing because of the presence of the old Jia who sits at the gate of the mountain. But do as the Romans do, you still have to treat people with sincerity. Xianhui wanted to strike while the iron was hot and add a few more words, but he couldn't think of a good way to say it for a while, so he hinted at the master of this way at the table, the great master with his eyes. Old immortal Jia immediately understood, it was his duty to do his duty, and immediately followed up with a few sincere words, the truth is such a big truth. People of course can't be vulgar, but they can't be unconventional at all. If you really want to make these empty truths come true, as the Taoist Xianhui said, it's like sprouting, blossoming and bearing fruit, or letting a sapling grow like a tree. Big and straight, one day it is expected to tower to the sky, and it can shade relatives, neighbors and passers-by. We have to be the lord of the mountain to dismantle the great principles in detail. Xianhui admired it very much. Probably this means that experts can know if there is one as soon as they make a move, and they are indeed a bit better than themselves. Cui Qingxian put down the white bowl. Since old immortal Jia is willing to treat people with sincerity, it is not good for Pindao to continue to use a false identity. In fact, Pindo's Taoist name is Kongshan, and the ashram houses are called cocoons. Jia Xing asked, Burning incense and sitting quietly, an empty mountain alone? A cocoon that binds itself? Cui Qingxian nodded and said, Pin Dao used to dig a well to make alchemy in a small place called Xuanjiao Mountain. He practiced for many years. Unfortunately, he was not talented enough, and the Tao of longevity misled me. The old Taoist patted the gourd ladle on his waist and said with a hearty smile, I usually make some wine by myself, which is not bad, but the poor Taoist failed the good wine. The Taoist wronged me in the wrong wine, so it's even. Jia Xing raised his bowl, replaced wine with tea, and sighed. A Taoist walks the way, meets mountains and lives in mountains, meets water and stops water, and walks like a god. At the gate of the mountain there were only 3 of them anyway, and they were all Taoist priests. If you praise the 2 of them, you can also praise yourself by the way. Cui Qingxian, whose Dao name is Kongshan, stood up, and the thin old man put his piano bag back on his back again and said with a smile, It's ridiculous to say, when the poor Taoist first entered the mountain to practice, he was young and frivolous, he didn't know the heights of the sky, and he looked down on the world. 3 mountains, 1 people. The old Taoist continued to wander alone. Old immortal Jia didn't take today's encounter too seriously, but just performed normally at an average level. When Qin Ping crossed the sea with his sword all the way, boarded the land of Aquarius continent, and entered the boundary of Beiyue, he asked Wei Xinjun to help him and returned to Luopa Mountain in an instant. At the gate of the mountain, Qin Pingan said with a smile after hearing a general idea from the old fairy Jia, It seems that I missed a worldly expert. Jia Xing helped to revise a sentence, Miss each other, let's leave. Cui Zongzhu has sent a letter with flying sword, telling me De Jiangxian not to forget to return to his sect on time. Mi Xiefeng is going to start the magic mirror, everything is ready, only Chief Mi is left. Jiang Shangzhen, who was a teacher in that village school, even abducted a few Mongolian children from neighboring villages to study in his own village school. He felt that his skill in enlightenment and teaching had surpassed that of Qin Shanzhu. In the Jumping Fish Mountain, Master Wen, who can't be shaken to sleep, take a bath, change clothes and sit on the bench to bask in the sun every day, no matter his skin is itchy, he still feels that he is doing well again. One day he even took the initiative to ask Pei Qian, who only gave 1 punch a day, to raise his realm to the limit. After Pei Qian made sure that Wen carefully wasn't joking, he punched down, and there was a big hole in the wall next to the martial arts arena. Before Wen carefully passed out, he vaguely heard Master Zheng say something like, Old rules, bookkeeping, my brothers get a 20% discount. The guy named Bai Xian often came to hang out in the martial arts field. When he saw this punch, he quickly picked up the purple sand pot and drank wolfberry tea, suppressing his shock. Zheng Dafeng was soft-spoken and made several oaths before he was lucky enough to read the Book of Heroes. After closing the book, Zheng Dafeng said something to be fair, it is really a book of life and death. Sitting on the bamboo chair under the eaves, Bai Xian looked at the martial arts master whom Zheng Dafeng said was weak in body but not weak in spirit. Mature, just wait for yourself to throw a cup for the sake of reason, brother Wen can be the vanguard general when besieging Pei Qian together. How did Wen Xinxiu know the way here, let alone the matter of being exceptionally listed? In the eyes of Master Zheng, who sees through and doesn't tell the truth, it is considered to be laying on the floor at the gate of hell. In any case, this kid Bai Xian has a weird personality, a bit weird, old-fashioned in speaking and doing things, but besides Master Zheng, he is the second member of the Luobashan genealogy who recognizes him, so we sit in rows together under the eaves on weekdays, warmly if you are careful, you are willing to chat with Bai Xian a few more words. Especially when he learned that Bai Xian was already a hidden sword cultivator at the Dragon Gate level at such a young age, when xianxia was more willing to talk warmly with him, and Zheng Dafeng held back his words. Be bad, be happy secretly. The two were on Jilling Peak and they only knew how to eat and drink all day long. I don't know who made a small report. They filed a complaint with Chen Shanzhu, and they were driven to Qiaoyu Mountain. They didn't go to the martial arts arena on the other side of Inyu Peak in Qiaoyu Mountain to help, but in Huaying Peak, Mi Dejin used flying swords to poke the embryos of those cultivators randomly, and Zhong Qian, who was a martial artist with a golden body, was just like that. Arrow target, let those 8 chi refiners mess up smashing technique. The sable hat girl, who seemed to be the top spot and the chief master, was more satisfied. It was a mess, just look at the excitement. But they don't go to Huaying Peak often and there is no point of view. Those who fish for 3 days and hang nets for 2 days, as long as no one urges them, they will resolutely not go. Zhong Qian wanted to make that Gontang worshipper work harder, so she urged the old man to settle down at Huaying Peak, so as not to have to jump back and forth between Yushan Mountain and sword-worshipping platform. The old deaf child laughed and said nothing. I am called Lao Deaf, I am not an old fool. In addition to Fuyao, Qin Pingan set up a cloud nest formation in Jumping Fish Mountain. Before that, it was obvious that Qin Shanju didn't want Meili to have too much interaction with this group of outsiders, who strictly belonged to the unnamed disciples of Luapa Mountain. But it may be a temporary change of mind. Qin Shanju suddenly figured out something, so Zhou Hufa's great cause of patrolling mountains is flourishing. The mountain guards of Luapa Mountain seem to have Fiolu and Tao Yushin, these two silent and dumb capable generals. The little girl in black was wandering alone on the mountain patrol road, with no one around, a green bamboo stick threatening and a small pole swishing. She secretly put on the cloak that the old cook tailored for her and was just the right size, and followed the instructions of Good Man Mountain. The method taught by the Lord is to stand still first, hold the corner of the cloak with 2 fingers, and then shake it vigorously, swaggeringly, oh, so majestic. Between Yingyu Peak and Huaying Peak in Qiaoyu Mountain, there is a snow-white waterfall pouring down more than 100 feet, and there is a stone bridge shaped like a rainbow. The millet grains wearing cloaks and satchels have to stop here every time, and occasionally meet with them. A colleague from Qilong Lane about this place, across a bridge, the 2 sides stood facing each other, the left guardian of Qilong Lane was lying on the other side early, and the little girl in black looked solemn and nodded. When you meet on a narrow road, the brave wins, one runs wildly, the other leaps forward, there is no loser, everyone wins. Both feet landed on the ground and one stood still. The little girl in black turned around and clasped her fists. In fact, it was Gu Ken, who was an outsider from Luobashan, who persuaded Qin Pingan to change his mind. Gu Ken said that you want to protect Zhou Meili too much. Do you really need to be so cautious? Before Zhou Meili met you in that dumb lake, did she have a guardian? If you are so cautious in your home's desolate mountain world, don't you underestimate your own mountain guards? Today the little girl in black is still wearing a cloak, with her arms folded around her chest, holding a green bamboo stick and a golden pole. Standing in the middle of the stone bridge, she looks up at the waterfall. He looked serious and frowned. It turned out that Sister Xiego suggested that she show her real body yesterday, stay in the pool, drink water with her mouth wide open, to be precise, catch the waterfall and see if she can drink enough water. So Xiao Meili seriously considered whether this proposal is feasible or not, and if someone accidentally saw it, it would be embarrassing or not. A warm palm was pressed on the head and Xiao Meili tilted his head. Hey, it turned out to be the good mountain master. Qin Pingan told her the idea and reason why he set up the cloud nest. Xiao Meili scratched his face. Ha, what did I think? What a big deal. Walking along the mountain road leisurely together, Qin Pingan borrowed the green bamboo stick, and the little girl in black carried the golden pole on her shoulder. The trekking stick poked down on the bluestone slab, making an aggressive sound. Millet raised her palm and placed a pile of melon seeds. While nibbling melon seeds, Qin Pingan complained, "It's not easy to practice Taoism and I'm busy with general affairs. I owe a lot of debts of favor and study. Far and near, there are so many things big and small. The old cook has a backlog of all kinds of letters on the desk. I worry about whether I can reply to the letter or how to write the reply letter." It was the first time for the nagging and disgruntled Qin Shanju to tell others what was in his heart. One big and one small, working together, finished nibbling the melon seeds, and the little ones clenched their fists and handed them to Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan didn't know what to do, but he still spread his palms and asked with a smile, "What?" Xiao Meili grinned and said, "I have saved a lot of fun and I will borrow some from the good Shanju." One loosens his fist and the other clenches it. Qin Pingan shook his fist, indicating that he had received it, and asked with a smile, "Isn't it a gift?" Xiao Meili nodded vigorously, "I only borrow it, not give it away." Qin Pingan smiled and narrowed his eyes, "Doesn't it still count as interest?" Meili shook her head, laughed and said, "It must." Qin Ping suddenly said, "Good deal." When they came on the road, under the sunlight, a rainbow hung over the waterfall. Sword of Coming Chapter 1129, the fastest update of Jianlai. The Yulin ferry has been expanding to facilitate the docking of more large ferries like Tongyin, so as to turn a temporary ferry into a permanent ferry. I heard that the Yunyan Kingdom's imperial court has outsourced the government-run vinegar, barley wine and ink making. Some bold young people from the capital fished here at night. Not far away were colorful boats filled with the scent of fat and powder, and people were drinking and drinking. The hosts were mostly dignitaries from the mountains, and they were here to entertain the immortal masters on the mountain. What they enjoyed was the moonlight, what they talked about was friendship, what they drank was gold and silver, and the people at the wine table called each other brothers, both of whom were named Qian. The teenagers by the river whispered, saying that the few colorful boats that could be opened for business here belonged to which royal relatives and the princes of which official seals. The teenagers occasionally saw a woman coming with staggering steps. Beside the boat rail, she took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her mouth and tidied up her makeup. She hesitated again, and instead of putting the handkerchief into her sleeves, she threw it away and hurried back to the feasting place. Now everyone in the government and the public knows that the owner of Tongyin Ferry is an immortal mansion with the prefix zone. In addition, the court also has martial law, and no idlers are allowed to approach Tongyin Ferry and disturb the repairs of the sword immortals. Therefore, Tongyin Ferry, the nearby body of water, is relatively quiet. Occasionally, a small boat approaches this place, and soon, like a wild bird scurrying out of the reeds, a warrior is performing Qing Kung Fu. A dragonfly touches the water, reminding the small boat to turn around and leave. The warrior curses in his heart, turns back, lowers his head and bends his waist, raising his breath to tread the water. Floating like a feather, walking on the flat ground, I wanted to go to the shore quietly. On the way, I saw two people on the other side of the boat railing looking towards me. A man in a green shirt, with a warm expression, a long-bearded Taoist, holds a sword on his back. The martial artist was startled, and quickly stopped and bowed to apologize to the two unfamiliar-looking immortal masters on the boat. The man in green shirt actually smiled and clasped his fists in return. This made the martial artist, who had recently eaten and leisurely at Yulindu, stunned. Must be right, Fang's realm is not high and his status is average. It's just that the martial artist can't help but wonder, how can he get to the Tongyin Ferry with an ordinary status? The entire territory of Yunyan Kingdom's Jianghu province is loose on the outside and tight on the inside. As the most important Yulin crossing, some colleagues joked that even if a dog pooped on the side of the Yulin crossing, whoever stepped on it would have to report it to the court for record. Lu Yen smiled and said, "Why didn't you recognize your identity?" Chen Pingan said helplessly, "I heard from Dongshan that the Yunyan Kingdom's court may have wanted to express their gratitude. Even the records of all the genealogy monks of the Qingping Jian sect, Yugui sect, etc. only left text and no pictures." Lu Yen joked, "It's not the ordinary accumulation of prestige." Chen Pingan didn't explain anything. In the past, any immortal mansion with the sect's head in Tongya continent was a well-deserved god, and the joy, anger, sorrow and joy of the immortal master were as clear as rain and snow. The mountains and rivers are beautiful, like a beautiful mute woman with tender feelings. The human body is floating like dust on the road, and the world is just like the ripples of water. Lu Yen continued the previous topic and said, "I will try not to delay Shanzhu Chen's practice time too much." Chen Pingan said, "Protecting the Tao is not cultivating the Tao." When a Taoist comes out of the mountain, in addition to gaining experience in the world of mortals and sharpening his Taoist heart, he also does nothing more than seek out immortal fate, collect heavenly materials and earthly treasures, accumulate merit and increase his Taoist power. There are also 3 external affairs. Although they are done occasionally, they are of great importance. For example, the first one is to guard the gate for others, such as Yao Qing, the national master of the Qingshan dynasty, guarding the gate for the ghost Su Jun. The next step is to save people and lead them up the mountain. To put it more bluntly, it means going out to find Taoist embryos, accepting them as disciples, strengthening the sect and continuing the Taoist lineage. Then it's about helping people protect the road. For example, in the Ohua Blessed Land, Jiang Shangzhen transformed into Zhou Fei of Spring Chao Palace in order to help Lu Feng, a bird's-eye view peak, to break through a love barrier. Jiang Shangzhen spent a lot of time on this, but the problem was that Lu Feng, a sword cultivator, was never able to break through it. The inner demon is probably still fighting against the wall in a land of lotus flowers. According to what Chief Zhou said afterwards, if Lu Feng had been willing to enter the Jade Gui sect in his early years, there would be no need to go to the Ohua Blessed Land. The strong melon is not sweet, but to quench his thirst, it's a pity that Lu Feng's elm not just didn't wake up and he had to hang himself from a tree. Previously at the Fuyolu private dojo, the old temple master had 2 comments about Xuanhuan, who was half a neighbor, one derogatory and the other praising. One line is that he disliked Xuanhuan for not being broad-minded enough and was one of the main culprits that led to the collapse of Izhou. What's the point of cultivating Taoism? It's just a private plan. The shortcomings of Tongyi's Hao are shared by Sun and Du. Another compliment, the evaluation is not low. Disciples like Jing Juzhong and Xuanhuan, the more the better. Lu Yen stroked his beard and smiled and said, "If Master Chen is so polite, then I will really have no contact with Master Chen." Chen Pingan nodded and said, "No need to see anyone outside." The reason why Lu Yan asked Qin Pingan to be his Taoist protector was of course not because Lu Yan could only find Qin Pingan. He traveled the world alone. Yun Shui had lived for 3,000 years, but Lu Yan still had several Taoist friends. Just like Master Huolong who came to Tongyi's Hao with him this time, he is a good friend who has been in love for many years. However, as Master Huolong himself said, guarding the gates is worry-free and labor-saving. Pindao is still in a good state now, so he will do his duty and never give up. Don't shirk, but when it comes to the hard work of protecting the Tao, we have to change it. The poor Taoist's ability to be patient is really not that good. Someone on the mountain once made an analogy. Helping people guard the gates is a short-term job, while protecting people's roads is a long-term job. Qin Pingan said, I hope the result will be a battle to protect the Tao. The younger generation will not have any merit, but will have a small amount of hard work. Lu Yan smiled knowingly. As expected, it couldn't be better. The implication beyond the language is very good. The easier it is for Qin Pingan to protect the Tao, the less he has to personally participate in the situation, and the less effort he has to do. It naturally means that Lu Yan's practice will be smoother. Lu Yan suggested, Master Qin might as well just use one clone to enter that blessed place. It's probably enough. Qin Pingan didn't dare to make a conclusion on how to enter there. He said, I know very little about that place. Do the seniors have detailed files similar to Jishu? It's better for the juniors to do their homework early. Lu Yan shook his head and said, I only have some hearsay information, so I can't give much inside information. I only know that because it is a first-class cave in a middle-class blessed land, there has always been a saying that it is top-heavy. The access control is extremely strict and there are many passes. Pindao was able to go there to experience, and it was only through the mediation of the Holy Master that he was able to open up the net. The Holy Master also made it clear to Pindao that making exceptions would come with a price. But what is the price? The Holy Master not clear. He said that he just wanted Pindao to think carefully before making a decision. Qin Pingan secretly waited in his heart, a middle-grade blessed land? Does it mean that the number of qi refiners is not too large and the level is limited? During the study tour, Li Baoping discussed similar issues with Cui Dongshan. At that time, the boy in white smiled playfully and asked the little girl in red cotton-padded jacket a question. Have you ever bought hot tofu from the roadside stall in that market? It turns out that in the eyes of mathematicians who are proficient in mathematics, the total amount of the aura of heaven and earth and the destiny of a dynasty is one of a certain quota, whether it is as large as the vast world or as small as any blessed land. Therefore, every martial artist becomes a martial arts master, and a monk achieves the realm of immortality by cutting tofu on a chopping board. First come, first served. The weight of the tofu cubes is the level of achievement. Li Baoping's next question caught the carefree Cui Dongshan a little off guard. Do you have to pay to cut off a piece of tofu? The price for buying tofu is determined by everyone and the stall owner. Is there any discount? Qin Pingan asked a key question. Senior, do you know who has the final say in that cave? Lu Yan hesitated for a moment and said, the founders of the three religions only established some rules at first and did not interfere in specific affairs. I heard that there are only a few people who are actually in charge, each with his own name. The battle to the sky changed the world, and some of them from ancient times, the gods such as Ant Feng, were able to retain their status as gods. Later mountain monks only knew that the passages for these gods to and from the human world were mostly on the top of the mountain where the ancestral palaces of military strategists from various continents were. But where they live, or rather are imprisoned, has always been subject to some speculation. After all, it is impossible for the founders of the three religions to let these gods scatter in the sky, otherwise Zhomi will go to the sky to attract the gods to their places, causing all the avenues to gradually collapse, and human beings will be destroyed. The time has long been in chaos, not to mention the smooth weather. I am afraid that even the bright and different roads and the changing of the seasons have become a luxury. The founders of the three religions, let alone blocking the door with their Taoist bodies, should be forced to disperse and mend the vacancies in those avenues. As for this group of ancient gods as well as the new batch of gods who were born along with the four worlds, their golden bodies were fixed on the cloud, where the cave, heaven and blessed land were connected. That's why Lu Yan said, there are strict rules over there. Qin Pingan changed the topic and asked, Senior, you have traveled around the world of Qingming. What is your biggest impression? Lu Yan smiled and said, the color of the blue sky over there can be said to be green and dripping, as if it is really about to drip onto the earth. Qin Pingan nodded and said, it's like the glaze color of a certain kind of porcelain in my hometown. If I have a chance, I'd like to see the different scenery there. Lu Yin waved the whisk lightly and said with a smile, I met a stranger in a certain mountain before, who said that the invisible time between heaven and earth was smelted from the fragments of the golden body. Qin Pingan asked, what is smelting? Lu Yin said, incense. Qin Pingan thought for a moment and said, wonderful idea. Lu Yin said, this gentleman also said that dreams are one of the incense burners. Qin Pingan shook his head and said, it's unbelievable. Lu Yin took out an inconspicuous yellow silk bag from his sleeve, handed it to Qin Pingan, and briefly explained the situation inside the bag. There are about 10 items each in a small bag. Loading, in addition to the 5-color soil from Haoran and Qingming Diyue, there are also several. This is a magic weapon that is not very valuable, but not very common either. Shanju Qing can take stock of it himself later. Just think of it as the reward for protecting the road next time. Qin Pingan stretched out his hand and gently pushed the bag back and politely declined, no reward will be given for no merit. When one day in the future the merits of protecting the Tao are accomplished, it will not be too late for seniors to discuss this matter. It's just a deposit. The future share will be calculated separately. Lu Yin handed the bag to Qin Pingan and said with a smile, on the way here Master Huolong said that it is best to give gifts, especially gifts to Master Qin. They are sent in separate pieces, which shows more courtesy and affection. It is too stupid for poor people. No need to bother. Qin Pingan put the bag into his sleeve and gave a Taoist ceremony to Master Chunyang. Master Huolong laughed and said, counting money, staring at a solitary ingot of silver on the table is not as fun as looking at a pile of copper coins. Cui Dongshen's little chicken pecked at the rice and said, it's so, a grain rain coin, how can there be a pile of snow coins like a hill to look happy at? Pei Qian said, there is a premium between Guyu money and Xiaoshu money when converted into snow money. Master is pragmatic and not unrealistic, so he will definitely choose the former. Cui Dongshan pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He took out a folding fan from nowhere and struck his palm, I missed the chess piece. It seems that the senior sister understands the gentleman better. As he spoke, Cui Dongshan glanced at the bag from the corner of his eye. Cui Dongshan reminded his husband in his heart, the most valuable thing is that bag. Master Huolong said in his heart, the 5 elements natal items you have are of good quality. This is quite impressive. This Taoist friend from Chunyang likes to travel to famous mountains and rivers the most. The things he gives are in contrast to each other in the 5 elements. It may be a little too much to say that it is a help in times of need, but it is the icing on the cake. Gifts are an understatement. Return to the mountain dojo and refine it carefully. I believe it will be of great benefit and help you to reach a higher level in the immortal realm. It is not difficult at all. This is what an expert will do. Then you will know if there is. Master Huolong hesitated for a moment, but still didn't point out something. In fact, the reward Qin Pingan should really ask for is to have a good discussion with Master Chunyang and ask for some Taoist mental methods that are traditional secrets from the family. Meeting I met Taoist Chunyang, but if you don't discuss Taoism and talk about the golden elixir, what's the difference between entering Baoshan and returning empty-handed? To put it bluntly, this guy is so thin-skinned that he is so scrupulous about this and other taboos when doing business with others. Qin Pingan and Lu Yen returned to the wine table. Xiego had just told Cui Dongshan about the Taoist embryo and let Cui sect leader decide whether to take her up the mountain. Unexpectedly, Cui Dongshan revealed the family background, Taoist name, sect, and other family treasures of the female cultivator and fellow Taoists. Xiego was puzzled and asked him if he had already taken a fancy to the woman's basic qualifications. Cui Dongshan laughed loudly and said that he did not have the ability to predict the future or open his eyes, but he was still well informed. The dozen or so people in his group arrived in the capital earlier than you and your husband. They had nothing to do and often walked around. People from various government offices looked through the official documents of the Ministry of Justice, glanced at them a few times and remembered them. I was not paying attention at first and almost missed this big omission. Xie Zishi, don't worry, since it is a talent recommended by Xie Zishi personally, he and Qingping Sword Sect will definitely focus on cultivating him. Cui Dongshan curiously asked about Xiego. Didn't he think about the day he would found a mountain sect? Xiego was not interested. He said that he had direct disciples and a large group of disciples and disciples. They found the Kaishan Dojo, established a sect and became the first sect. So what if there is a next sect? Practice should not be done by oneself but let others do it for you. What? Cui Dongshan's little chicken pecked at the rice, nodded his head and kept saying that everyone has his own ambitions, all are good, all are good. The arrival of Master Huolong was like giving Feng Shuetao a big bowl of hangover soup. Although Feng Shuetao was nervous, he was still tough and did not say a soft word. After all, he is a time-honored person who has risen to prominence, and Ai Zhou has a bad relationship with Beiju Luzhou. It is not appropriate to show any flattery to Master Huolong, both emotionally and rationally. Besides, as a wild cultivator, he still has some ability to manipulate people's hearts. Sure enough, the old master didn't take it seriously. Instead, he glanced at Feng Shuetao and sat down with a smile. He drank a bowl of wine and wiped his mouth. The old master said with a kind face, "Friend Qingmi, I am a poor Taoist. I drank the fine wine, but the word bei seems to have to stay. Although you Ai Zhou, Lu Kaishan and Wei Tiankai do have two new ones who have been promoted to the 14th realm, you are good at everything, and you are more capable of making money. It's number one in Jiuzhou, but it's not that good at all. Fighting is not an option." Feng Shuetao didn't dare to make irresponsible remarks when it came to fighting. Ai Zhou Qingmi was never among the handful of powerful people promoted by Haoran. Especially after he personally walked through the wild world, Feng Zuido's mood became even lower. Cui Dongshan said from the bottom of his heart, "Brother Feng, please ask me quickly. We are also in the 14th realm. Can seniors really be able to beat 2 with 1? Feng Shuetao turned a deaf ear. "Not a fool. Do you dare to ask such a question and only want to fight?" Xiego didn't have any worries and asked directly, "Now that we are united, what does the world look like in your eyes?" Master Huolong twisted his beard and pondered for a moment, then said slowly, "I can't say much about the mystery here. I can only say one thing. In the eyes of a poor Taoist, the heaven and the earth are a stove, and as for you, you are just firewood." Xiego asked, "The invisible spiritual energy flowing between heaven and earth is the spark that can be used anytime and anywhere?" Master Huolong was non-committal and said with a smile, "It is quite a strange thing that my fellow Taoist has not reached the 14th level. To be worshipped as a second-rate person is to be humbled by my talents." Xiego followed the poll and asked, "Is Piety Peak short of a chief?" Master Huolong is recognized as the kind of master of chatting without landing on the subject. He can pick up any conversation and warm up any awkward situation. If Master Qin doesn't mind poaching, why not be the chief minister in name only? Xiego grinned and said, "Forget it, one girl will not marry 2 men." Master Huolong immediately said from his heart, "As long as fellow Taoist Bai Jing becomes the chief worshipper of Piety Peak, he can go to Ai continent with Pindao in an honorable way." After a while, Lu Kaishan and Wei Tiankai, 2 against 2, couldn't be fairer. Moreover, the teacher has a good reputation, so as long as he doesn't get angry, it's hard for the Confucian temple to say anything. Hearing this, Xiego's eyes lit up. "Let me take the lead, let me try first and see if I can fight 2 against each other? If the opportunity is not good, will you help me?" Now how much these new 14ers weigh, Xiego is extremely curious. Master Huolong put down his wine bowl, wiped his mouth and said with a smile, "There are some things that just make you happy when you think about them. Once you are happy, that's all." Perhaps he felt that it was rare that there were no ordinary people at the wine table tonight. He eloquently recounted his practice experience. Whether it's a matter of course or it's pure luck, as long as a monk successfully reaches the 14th realm, he has found a road that is infinitely close to immortality. Then just take your time. Pure martial arts, but also there is a saying that boxing is afraid of young people. But Taoists, approaching the top of the mountain, still have to say that the older you are, the higher the Taoism. New 10 the 4th becomes the 4th, and when the hard-working daughter-in-law becomes a mother-in-law, she will naturally have the right to look down on the next group of new 14ths. Many people in the Ascension realm who have become old and decayed in form and spirit often mistakenly think that cultivating the Tao is just that. Poor Taoists also experience such a bleak period when their Taoist minds retreated. Who can reach the Ascension realm? As a proud man, at the beginning of his enlightenment and ascension, who doesn't have the heart to be brave and diligent? Unfortunately, as time goes by, his practice is hindered, and he will inevitably become slack, and then he thinks that the path is hopeless and he is completely discouraged. However, there are a total of 15 realms of knowledge and cultivation which are like 3 books: upper, middle and lower. When you break through the nascent soul realm and enter the upper 5 realms, you think you are in the 3rd part of this book. When you reach the immortal realm, you will be shocked to find that you are in the 2nd part. Hearing this, Feng Shuetao continued, "What's even more terrifying is that I have entered the Ascension realm. I am afraid that I am in the 1st book." Lu Yen smiled and said, "By analogy, after the union, you will be afraid that your monastic career will be just a preface, right?" Master Huolong laughed heartily and just raised the wine bowl. Everything is worse than having the cup in your hand, and there are no worries outside the cup. Xiego echoed, sleep until you wake up naturally, and sleep until the food in the world is ready. Cui Dongshan praised, what a beautiful poem. It has no rhythm, but it has charm. Only Pei Qian did not squint, looked at his nose and heart, and drank silently. The rest of the people subconsciously looked towards Qin Shanju, who was rumored to be extremely talented and famous for his poetry. Taking advantage of both Taoist Chunyang and Master Huolong being present, Feng Shuatao also felt that the atmosphere at the wine table was good, and the drunkenness was daring. Following the previous topic, he asked a more tacky question: the Ascension realm will definitely not be able to beat the 14th realm? As far as he knew, Liang had 2 sparring sessions with Zhen Invincible Yudo and Tianwai Tian of Qingming World. This is a battle between the Ascension realm sword cultivator and the 14th realm. The only spectators of the battle are demons from outside. Overseas in Nambosu Island, Qin Chunan intercepted the wild Lu Cha. This was a life-and-death fight between a perfect and pure Confucian in the Ascension realm, carrying the sun and moon on his shoulders, and a newly promoted sword cultivator in the 14th realm. On the battlefield of the old dragon city in Aquarius continent, the true dragon King Zhu had a close fight with Fei Fei and Zhu Yen, who were on the throne of the wilderness. In the realm of Tuiyue Mountain, the young hermit official and the culprit, the chief disciple of the savage ancestor, belonged to the struggle between 2 people from the 14th realm. It's just that neither of them are pure swordsmen in the true sense. Some results are reasonable. Some wins and losses are unexpected. Master Huolong laughed and said, what does it mean to win? Is it a tie at a lower level, or a defeat, or a beheading? Fellow Qingmi Taoists' wording must be more accurate, otherwise it will be difficult to make it clear. Feng Shuatao asked doubtfully, is it possible that a person in the Ascended Realm still has a chance to kill the 14th realm? Master Fire Dragon twisted his beard and pondered for a moment. Before this year there is no chance of winning. A difference of 1 realm is a world of difference. After this year there is no telling. I talked about this with my friends before and reached a consensus. When faced with the 14th realm in the Ascension realm, the former will win if he can escape without harming the Tao. Master Huolong was silent for a moment and said, for example, Taoist Chunyang fellow, while walking on the road, I got into a dispute with a certain new 14er from a certain world. The reasoning didn't make sense, so I had to fight. Fellow Taoist Chunyang got into a real fight with him, and there was a lot of trouble. Small odds. Lu Yen laughed dumbly and shook his head slowly. This assumption cannot be taken seriously. Xiego smiled from ear to ear. Suppose Bai is also a pure sword cultivator. If the old blind man had refined 1 or 2 natal characters at the beginning, and if Zhomi had secretly eaten 2 or 3 of the 14th realms, and if most of the 13th and 14th realm demons in the wild world had died, if the little master is not bound by rules. If the master of Bixiao Cave encounters a world where a toad does not drink water, the world will be peaceful for tens of millions of years. I have been promoted to the 14th realm, and I have gathered more than 20 roads, large and small, connecting the sea and the land, and a sword energy as powerful as a blasphemy, ha ha ha. Master Huolong glanced at Bai Jing, a swordsman with a girlish appearance and an ermine hat. Can she really possess more than 20 profound Taoist traditions? Even if he had known for a long time that she had excellent qualifications and profound background. But when Bai Jing told the truth in person, Master Huolong was still a little surprised. Having seen the strong winds and waves, Master Huolong saw only a handful of Taoist geniuses, as far away as Wei Shi and as close as his left and right. Qin Pingan smiled and reminded from his heart, what are you talking about? You can travel around the world without revealing your wealth. Xiego replied confidently, Master of the Mountain, you don't know something. What I say and do now is a scheming person. It's very scary. This language is used to deceive the eyes and is used in the art of war. This is the 36 strategies to show the enemy's weakness. Qin Pingan was doubtful about this. It's hard to say whether the ancient sword cultivator Bai Jing had a city or not, and how deep the city was. Just talking about Xie Zishi of Luolu Mountain, a character who was willing to give himself the nickname Guzi. Qin Pingan found a refer to ask, how many of the Taoist practices practiced by Han Qies in Baidi City can catch your eye? Xiego Qin laughed a few times and said vaguely, I don't say bad things about fellow Taoists behind my back. The old man twisted his beard and thought for a moment, if we really care about the scene before the rain, it does make some sense, such as Ningyao and the wild and magnificent scenery. As the co-masters of their respective worlds, their ascension realm was previously unique. Therefore, even the 14th realm monks would never provoke them if they could not do so. Otherwise, even if the 14th realm defeated them in the long run, it will still lead to a lose-lose situation. After all, this move is almost an enemy of the entire world. Of course, the consequences are endless and the consequences are huge. The Tao consumes too much. In fact, at this level, there are also existences such as Leap Moon Peak and Savage Dial. The 5 worlds can be counted with one hand. The next ones are Taoist Chunyang and City Master Zheng. These people can do whatever they want to do. A little further behind are Zhao Tianshi and Yao Qing. They have already been blessed with good fortune and perfect merits. The matter of joining the Tao is really a matter of time. The next level down is Taoist friends Xia and strangers as well as Hao Su and others. The sword heart is pure. As a sword cultivator he has an innate advantage and has huge killing power, but the pass is more difficult to break. The scene after the rain this time is proof. There are several. As a sword cultivator has he reached a higher level? Further back there are those in the Ascension realm such as Wild Peach Pavilion who are good at fighting. There are more of them. As for further back there is nothing to talk about. These 4 kinds of cultivators are the powerful ones on the top of the mountain. Ascension facing the 14th realm, the first 2 levels are enough to protect oneself, and the latter 2 are still capable of fighting, but the specific outcome, whether it is victory or defeat or life and death, depends to a large extent. It is in the hands of the 14th realm. It depends on whether the 14th realm is willing to risk its life, whether the 14th realm is willing to die, and whether it is willing to trade the real life of the Tao for the other party's loss of Tao. During this period, there were a few special cases that were enough to make the 14th realm feel troublesome, such as one of Lu Ji's natal flying swords. The 14 realms that should be in an invincible position must carefully weigh the cost. Pei Qian was surprised because she did not expect that Master Huolong would place Mr. Xiego and Mr. Xiaoma after Zhao Tianshi and the others. The old master stroked his beard and smiled. As for the 14th realm, I have just entered the industry. I am young and it is not easy to talk nonsense. Why did Wu Shuangjiang work so hard and plan for a long time just to refine 4 imitation fairy swords before he was willing to start the troubled times and take the lead in rising up? It was Wu Shuangjiang who felt that his killing power in the 14th realm was lacking. Zheng Juzhong had a heated discussion with Yu Dou, who was visiting Baidi City. Zheng Juzhong is in the 14th realm with 1 person and 3 people, and Yu Dou is not in by Yujing, but Zheng Juzhong still loses. Master Huolong suddenly stood up and winked. Qin Pingan stood up silently and followed him. The old man walked up to the top of the ferry, held it up with both hands and asked with a smile, "Master Qin, how do you feel now after we parted ways on the island?" On the way to the mountain the wind blows from all directions. From nascent soul to Jade Pu, you need to pass the heart barrier and meet the inner demons. The key is to have a clear mind. From ascension to joining the Tao, the key lies in one's skill and whether it can fit in with the Tao of heaven and earth. When you reach the top of the mountain, you are in a league of your own. At the wine table, Pei Qian asked quietly, "Senior brother, Master seems a little nervous after seeing the old man?" Cui Dongshan pretended to be stupid and said, "Is it an illusion?" The old man helped give an explanation, "Thousands of threads, mixed feelings and mixed flavors?" Qin Pingan said honestly, "I can't tell clearly for a while." The old man looked up at the sky and said with a smile, "If you want to return the world to the world, you have to be alone? Don't be in a hurry, think about it slowly." Qin Pingan was lying on the railing, lost in thought. With the bright moon in the sky, the old man pointed to the sky and said something that seemed like nonsense. "If I remember correctly, there were 4 gates in the ancient heaven." Qin Pingan seemed to have come to his senses and gave a concise explanation, "Come out of the mountain." The old man hummed and nodded slightly, "It's interesting. The heart and moon are full tonight." Sword of Coming Chapter 1130, the fastest update of Jianlai. Lu Yen was the first to say goodbye, and Qin Pingan wished this Chunyang master, who is known as the #1 golden elixir, good luck in his experience. Master Qin Shan also said some auspicious words, hoping that the senior Taoist heart would be as perfect as the 15th month. Feng Shuatao was puzzled. It is common sense that the moon waxes and wanes. Logically speaking, when it is full, it loses. Is this a good saying? Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and could only explain to the ignorant brother Feng from his heart. As the saying goes, the moon on the 15th day is 16 round. Feng Shuatao was speechless for a moment. Shanzhu Qin did have unique knowledge in speaking. Qin Pingan went to meet Xing Yun and Lu Shui, 2 local sword cultivators from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and chatted about the customs of the wild side. Cui Dongshan didn't have a long but. He immediately pulled Feng Shuatao off the Tongyin ferry and asked this ascended realm man if he was interested in finding a job with the Qingping sword sect. He regarded it as doing his brother a favor. Since his feelings were it's time to go out and drink, so let's not talk about money so as not to hurt the brotherhood. Feng Shuatao had already suffered a big loss from Jianghu, but he just refused to evade. Besides, he really didn't feel that he and Shui sect leader were from the same family. On the other side, walking in the brightly lit streets and alleys, the boy in white threw his sleeves into a crackling sound. Pei Qian cleared the wine table and went back to his room to practice walking in silence. Master Huolong found the girl in the mink hat who was alone, and asked straight to the point with a smile, "May I ask fellow Taoist Bai Jing, what kind of scenery does it look like when you look at the sky and the earth?" Xiego curled his lips, "Nothing fancy." Master Huolong was stunned for a moment before he remembered that this language seemed to be the dialect of the small town in Qinpingan. He was silent for a moment and said with a smile, "Only those who have met before are qualified to say such things." Xiego stretched out his hands and tugged Yao Mao. "You all think that my aptitude for cultivating is very good. In fact, I think it's just average and not top-notch. I just took a huge advantage. I was born early and I was lucky enough to meet a lot of old people." The characters on page seem to be Sravakas, in the narrow sense according to Buddhism? Is that right? I have roughly calculated that I have met, asked for advice in person, discussed with each other and lost in fights. There are almost 100 of them. Who are these ancient Taoist priests? If you put any of these ancient Taoist priests in today's world, wouldn't they be top-notch figures? In the past, I always ignored these things and just thought they were ordinary. When I came here, I often wandered at the foot of the mountain. I saw the Taoist priests again and I was depressed. Live or die to clear up the confusion, I will. Master Huolong waited patiently for the next sentence. Xiego rubbed his red cheeks and held it in for a long time before giving an explanation. "I want to cry." When Master Huolong heard this, he suddenly laughed heartily, expressed his deep agreement, and even said a few good words. Xiego had a melancholy look on his face. "Mr. Zhu is a critical friend. He criticized me very rudely, saying that I was born at the right time and have gone through many hardships to practice Taoism. I am lucky and always have near misses. I seem to be taking my time. I am slowly accumulating Tao power, but I don't know my true intention. When my realm is high, I retreat from the Taoist mind. Therefore, I only realize small fruits which is still far from being mature. So I went out to relax and take a trip. Xuanhuan, the old blind man's opinion of me is different from Mr. Zhu's." "Not much." Master Huolong laughed dumbly. "Mr. Zhu? Zhu Lian, a martial artist from Lotus Flower Blessed Land? It is true that he is a rare and wonderful person, but on Xiego's side Zhu Lian will never age no matter what, right?" Xiego glanced at the old man and said, "In my eyes, you are also very old." Master Huolong stroked his beard and smiled. He said this in a very down-to-earth manner, which made people feel happy after listening to it. Xiego regards Feng Shuatao, whose Taoist name is Qingmi, as a junior among the juniors. Even Lu Yen, whose Taoist name is Chunyang, is at most a peer on the path of cultivation, and they can just call each other Taoist friends. However, the old cook in his poor family and the old man next to him do have a strange ability that makes people think that they are the kind of elders they think of. What they say is teaching, and they are telling you a few words of wisdom from people who have experienced it. In this matter, even Shanzhu Qin, who likes to be reasonable, seems to be a bit unreasonable. Master Huolong smiled and said, "The Sunset Landing was once the private domain of fellow Taoist, causing the Golden Crow to sleep soundly for thousands of years. It happened to be in Aquarius continent. Fellow Taoist is so reasonable and willing to give in, which is quite unexpected. If the rumors on the mountain are correct, it seems that Bai Jing leased this dojo to the Dali Imperial Court." Xiego curled his lips. "First of all, the powerful dragon will not overwhelm the local snake, and besides, our mountain master is about to become the Grand Master of the Greatly Kingdom. Why don't one family speak the same language as the other?" But she quickly added, "If I fall into the wild world, it depends on whether I can speak well or not. No one can be the lobbyist, not even Mr. Bai." Master Huolong nodded and said, "Principal Taoists like to hear honest words from honest people." Even Jiang Shangzhen was very curious about Xiego's Taoist roots, and privately asked Qin Pingan whether it was possible that Miss Xie was from the Shinto. This kind of speculation is easy to understand. After all, Bai Jing's dojo is well known on the top of the mountain. During a high-ranking day, she once carved and opened up a fire palace as a shelter. However, according to the inside story leaked by Qing Tong, Bai Jing's origin is indeed a demon clan on the earth, not a member of the ancient heaven. Because of Xiao Mo's relationship, Xiego and Qin Pingan chatted about the past in a more casual manner. She did not deny that she initially wanted to take the better-born son as her own, and then tried to learn from the ancient world. One of the 10 richest people, Lan Qi, a female cultivator, refined this great son into her natal object. However, she soon discovered that the great son actually gave birth to spiritual wisdom, and the avenue manifested into a golden crow. Bai Jing changed his original intention and protected the path for her. So when Xiego proposed to go to Haoran world, Bai Zhe didn't stop him even though he knew that Manhuang would lose some of his top combat power. This was a very important reason. It's not just as simple as Xiego going to find Xiao Mo. According to the rules of the wilderness, when it comes to the Taoist's great opportunity, all calculations of interests must make way for it. What's more, Bai Jing is also a candidate sword cultivator in the 14th realm who Bai Zhe has high hopes for. Master Huolong smiled and said, "Really speaking, Pindao, fellow Taoist Bai Jing and Master Chunyang are somewhat related to each other in the lineage of Taoism. It is very appropriate to say fellow Taoist." Xiego nodded vigorously. "In the future, the three of us will often visit each other. If we encounter a hard nail that our hands, we will say hello to each other and keep a cloud-piercing arrow to meet us with thousands of troops, haha." Master Huolong touched his palm and said with a smile, "It's easy to talk. In the vast void outside the sky, there are countless big suns floating in the sky, and each big sun is like a ferry, leading to the palace that was praised as the Imperial Palace by later Taoists. One Danshao Jiangke Huiyang Palace. Lu Yin, a real person from Chunyang, was the most famous person in history. He had taught fire techniques many times in this ancient ruins. Most of the people here who listened to the teachings humbly were noble ancient dragons." Master Huolong asked suddenly, "It seems that fellow Taoist Bai Jing is very interested in Pei Qian?" Xiego smiled awkwardly. "Creating gangs in the mountains is just like children playing house, just for fun." Under the instigation of the white-haired boy, they all recognized Guizhuzhou as the leader of the alliance, and established their own mountain with Pei Qian and his gang. Master Huolong smiled. "Oh?" Xiegugan smiled and said, "Master Huolong changed the subject. I wonder who was the first to use sweetness to describe a sweet dream. It's amazing." Xiego understood. She had been sleeping for thousands of years, and Huolong Jinren had always moved the world with his sleep. In this complicated world, meeting a few people with simple ideas is like meeting a good drinker and fine wine. Xiego grinned and said, "Old master, if we met on the road 10,000 years ago, we would definitely become good friends." Master Huolong twisted his beard and said, "Same feeling." Xiego said, "What is the old man going to do next?" Master Huolong smiled and said, "Return to the wilderness, find a few people who can really fight, and learn the Taoism from each other." Because Qin Pingan and Xiego did not deliberately hide their tracks when they boarded the ship, the ears and eyes installed by Yunyan State on Yilindu did not dare to take it lightly and immediately informed the court. No matter how small the territory of Yunyan country is, there are still a handful of local qi practitioners. In the corridor on the top floor of a private house on the shore of the ferry, there is a group of boys and girls looking at the Tongyin ferry in the distance. They have nothing to do on weekdays. They just stare at the movements of the entire Yilindu. They are not afraid of having nothing to do, but they are afraid that the foreign immortal master will have a dispute with the local family. I heard that the Minister of Rites is on tenterhooks every day, going to the temple to burn fragrant. Fortunately, so far there has not been any uncontrollable mess in the jianghu area. The emperor and a large group of royal relatives are increasingly looking forward to having someone come here as a guest and meet him. But it's fun to say that first, His Majesty the Emperor of Yunyan Kingdom, when a golden elixir comes to the capital, he will personally host a banquet to entertain him, and then Yuanying will do it. The golden elixir is not enough and then it becomes the upper five. Jade Pu, who was in the same realm, is now more even when he heard that there was an immortal coming. His Majesty the Emperor seemed not to be interested. After all, he had even met the Ascension realm named Qingmi. There was a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes sitting cross-legged, sword across his knees, frowning and asking, "Is it him?" Next to her was a slender girl with cold eyebrows. She looked up at the ferry and reassured, "It's hard to say." They had received a confidential message from the Ministry of Justice of the Imperial Court before. The head of the Qingping sword sect came to Tongyishao in person, and Mi De Jiangxian soon arrived. He made a great contribution and found those few remnants of the wild monster clan who killed innocent people indiscriminately, and the turmoil of Dadu was the excavation can finally proceed smoothly. Without this key clue, None of them would have connected the man in blue shirt next to the girl in the mink hat with the legendary young hidden official. The young man is the only local sword cultivator in Yunyan country, and it is inevitable that he is a little complacent in his spiritual state of mind. Now that his horizons have opened up, he feels that the pressure has increased sharply, and he has become taciturn on weekdays. The streets of the capital were full of strange people and strangers who once thought that the earthly immortal they pursued their whole life was nothing. This made the young swordsman seem to be practicing silent meditation recently. If Tanguis Hao was still the same Tanguis Hao a few decades ago, with his Taoist qualifications and sword cultivator status, if nothing else happened he should have gone to a certain sect to further his studies. The young man was in a gloomy mood and said in a low voice, "Those who are accomplished monks passing by our Yunyan country, will it be like passing by an ant nest for people like them?" In the past, Tanguis Hao had little information, and the chi refiners often had their eyes high above their heads and were not interested in the outside world at all. Now that things have changed, they can no longer help but to keep their doors closed and feel arrogant. The girl was stunned when she heard this and turned her gaze away from the Yulin fairy and said softly, "Zhong Chui, whether it is those sects from other places, or the land gods who travel here under aliases, in the face of these unattainable behemoths, we just give it a wide berth." The young man named Zhong Chui murmured, "It's easy to ask the gods but hard to send them away," because he didn't quite believe that the Qingping sword sect was a mountain sect that opened a charity hall. Are there really such people in the world who care so much about the quality of the world outside themselves? I am afraid that one day the Qingping sword sect will gain a firm foothold in Tongya continent, and all the countries along the coast of Dadu will become puppets of that fairy palace. A martial artist climbed over the wall to the top floor and bought a jar of barley wine from a time-honored shop. He climbed over the railing. The middle-aged martial artist's face was somewhat similar to that of the young man in the corridor. The girl covered her mouth and smiled sweetly. "Uncle Zhong, you drove away another illegal cruise ship." "I saw it. He was very heroic." The man laughed and said, "Girl Kai, not only that, I also met two strangers on Tanjian's boat and made an appointment to drink." A tall young man who was taking a nap against the wall quickly asked, "It's not the man in the green shirt, is it? Did he tell you his identity? Is his surname Chin?" The man boasted and didn't make any drafts. He said seriously, "We just want to have a drink together. We don't need to know our names." Over on the roof, a young man in white was lying with his legs crossed. Feng Shuatao was speechless. He came here to drink the northwest wind and listen to a few children complaining. What was the meaning of it? The young man said regretfully, "It's a pity. If it were really that person and we got involved again, Uncle Zhong, you would be rich." The man said with a smile, "Young people should not always think that they will be successful if they meet a noble person." After slapping the young man on the forehead, the man joked, "You brat, do you know that in the eyes of those rich and powerful nobles, you guys have prices stuck on your foreheads?" On the other side of the roof, Feng Shuatao smiled and said, "That's a bit too much to say." Chui Dongshan, who rested his head on the back of his hand, swayed his legs and said, "He is a well-informed and reasonable person." Feng Shuatao asked, "Who does Chui Zongzhu have in mind to win over?" The Qingping sword sect is different from the Luopa mountain. The latter announced that it would be closed for 20 years and clearly did not want to increase its momentum. On the other hand, Chui Dongshan of the Xia sect has been recruiting troops. Chui Dongshan smiled and said, "Brother Feng, don't always think of me as snobbish. I just enjoy the moon with like-minded friends." Chui Dongshan explained, "I am just a transitional sect master. I only need to be responsible for laying a good foundation and building a good relationship. It's a good framework, but some gaps are deliberately left so you don't have to worry about making up the numbers. Qingping sword sect will definitely hand it over to junior brother Chao in the future. At hand, when Chao Qinglang takes over, he will have something to do, at least he won't have to tie his hands and follow suit." Feng Shuatao nodded. If Qingping sword sect is too CUIS style, Chao Qinglang will be in trouble. Chui Dongshan hummed, "That's a bit harsh to say." Feng Shuatao was helpless. On the other side of the corridor, although they felt that what the man said was reasonable, they were always unconvinced. Yesterday, today and tomorrow the moon waxes and wanes and the young people are young. There is no night ban in the capital. Young people with money and energy in their pockets, as well as spiritual practitioners who are full of energy, are often night owls. Many shops temporarily hire assistants to take care of the shop for the sake of business, which means they can earn $2 a day, so why not do it? A pair of Taoist monks who became a couple halfway through also came to the capital of Yunyan Kingdom. The man had a face as white as a sheet of paper and a fierce appearance. He was accompanied by a fair-skinned woman with an exquisite figure. They were just hanging out and gaining insights. It's hard to say whether you can travel all over the world if you have reason, but you can indeed travel all over the world if you have money. They had received a large amount of windfall, and their original intention of living under someone else's roof had faded away, so they did not go to the mountain god's mansion to seek a living. They were Fan Tong and xianxia. Along the way they also heard about several major events far away. For example, a certain great swordsman surnamed Mi from the Sword Chi Great Wall took action and uncovered those who were making trouble and smashing talismans. Monster Beast. Another example is Yugue Zong Duo has a heaven-reaching figure to worship, named Qingmi and old in the Ascension realm. Naturally, Fan Tong and xianxia didn't know that the culprits who almost stopped the Dadu excavation work were the group of young men and women they met in the dilapidated temple. As for the swordsman named Mi and who he was, Fan Tong asked. It was probably because others saw that he did not seem to be a kind person, so they ignored him at all. Fan Tong really wanted to find an xianxia inn or shop on Yulindu, and asked the immortal master if he recognized a person named Qin Pingon, or buy a few Shandy newspapers to see if there was any chance. Really found that name. In the end, the woman gave up the idea by saying, "You have money?" Fan Tong actually did have private money, but he didn't need to reveal it out of curiosity. They stayed in an ordinary inn in the capital. When I was walking on the shore of the ferry earlier, I saw a moored ferry. It was the largest ferry. There were always some young and beautiful fairies pointing at it. The crowd of Yingying, Yanyan, and all the fairies with genealogies were gathered together. Fan Tong, a hot-blooded old man, of course failed to keep his eyes open, so he was pinched and pinched again and again by the angry woman. The pain makes the man sweat, the pain returns it hurts, and taking care of it are two different things. Fan Tong believed that Master Chen would be in a similar situation if he traveled with them. I just don't know if Master Chen Xian, who claims to be the Sword Immortal, would be frightened if he met me, the Sword Immortal, who is being talked about a lot now, and had the chance to have a few words face to face. Tonight, the couple went out of the city again and came to Yulindu to eat out in a restaurant. This kind of expense was numerous, and they had saved a few snow coins before. In the past, women liked to visit all kinds of rouge and gouache shops, but here it became even more exaggerated. Fan Tong was surprised. She picked and picked but didn't buy. How could she be happy? xianxia chose a fly restaurant and planned to eat hot pot. As soon as Fan Tong sat down, the boss began to worry about whether the couple would be freeloaders, but then he thought again, the government is so tough now, isn't it? The people at the next table were people who came down from the mountain. Although they didn't use their innermost words, the content of their conversation was all about the fairy family. However, Fan Tong knew very well that the reason for this was because they were accompanied by several ordinary women with heavy makeup and jewels. When those women saw Fan Tong, who looked like a wanted criminal, they felt a little disdainful. Looking at xianxia next to the fierce man, their eyes had a meaning that only women could understand. xianxia looked proud. "I am now a decent woman. What about you? You can make money by going to bed, right?" Fan Tong didn't know that there was an undercurrent surging here, and there was more interest in the slightly suspicious chat content of those genealogy monks. They were explaining some of the inside stories of the immortal family to the women, saying that the attire of the chi refiners in the mountains can be divided into 3, 6, or 9 grades. The first type is those who can tame immortal birds and beasts as mounts, either because they have good luck, or it means that he has a strong enough background and is rewarded by his master and elders. The second type is an expensive talisman boat. This kind of fairy treasure cannot be afforded casually. The third type is even more exaggerated. You can have a Liao Yin is always eating the private fairy with fairy money. xianxia tapped the man next to her with her elbow and raised her eyebrows. Fan Tong laughed and said that these 3 kinds of immortal styles were beyond her reach and she had to find a good sleeping position in her dreams. All the women looked directly at a young man who drank slowly. He was the only one at the table without a female companion. The eloquent man changed the subject and said that Mr. Hong has a talisman treasure boat from the Patriarch Hall to congratulate him on entering the cave realm. The young man surnamed Hong smiled lightly, took a sip of his drink, and said that his meager Taoist skills were nothing at all. Compared with a true Taoist genius, he was far behind. The more self-effacing he is, the hotter the eyes of the women at the same table become. The man who was willing to serve as a helper for the man named Hong continued, "The most outrageous thing is, of course, that I have a private fairy." While eating hot pot, xianxia secretly rolled her eyes from time to time. Fan Tong just felt that this barley tasted soft and not strong enough. At this moment, out of the corner of her eye, the woman spotted a familiar figure on the other side of the door. She quickly stood up and saw that the man next to her was still devouring his food, so she kicked her. Fan Tong raised his head blankly, and the man suddenly smiled brightly. He was reunited with Master Qin Xian here. Qin Pingan sat on the bench opposite them with a smile. Shamelessly, let's eat and drink together. You treat me, you'll pay the bill. Fan Tong wiped his mouth. After all, he was a fastidious person who had never read a book. This is so embarrassing. Xia Sanyang smiled charmingly and said, "Why are we so polite to Master Qin Xian?" Fan Tong plucked up the courage and asked, "Master Qin Xian, I would like to ask, which profession do you belong to?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Xing Xing will be the #1 scholar." Fan Tong is shy. The woman couldn't help laughing. She actually wanted to pick up food for Qin Pingan and help scald the food in the hot pot, but she hesitated and decided not to do it. Unpleasant. A pair of bowls and chopsticks were placed on the table, and Qin Pingan didn't say much. He just buried his head in eating. The old rule is that hot pot is all about wine. I have everything in the world. Just when they heard the name Master Qin, the table next to him glanced at the man in green shirt, but they just passed him by at a glance. Fan Tong lowered his voice and asked, "What is Master Qin doing here?" Qin Pingan picked up the wine bowl, clinked it with the couple, and drank it all in one gulp. Qin Pingan first took out a few pieces of tripe from the pot with a spoon, and put them on the couple's plates respectively. Then he explained with a smile, "I happen to have an acquaintance here, busy with some small things." Fan Tong said oh but didn't take it seriously. The woman stared blankly at the tripe on the plate. When she came to her senses, she turned around and told the boss to buy another pound of barley wine. In the alley outside, His Majesty the Emperor of Yunyan Kingdom, who had hurried out of the palace for a private visit incognito, stood at the corner of the wall patiently, holding his breath and concentrating. On the other side of the Tongyin ferry, Xiego had her hands on her hips, feeling proud. She was even more looking forward to Xiao Mo's return home. When the owner of the mountain said that he was going to meet two friends, Xiego asked him to wait for a moment and said that he had something to ask for and that he would be involved in learning. When it comes to studying, Qin Pingan has always believed that a good memory is worse than a bad pen since he was a boy. Along the way, he has been describing various landscapes, urban customs and architectural construction methods in manuscripts. Perhaps because of being infected by Master Qin, or maybe just looking for some fun, the girl in the mink hat would follow suit. During a break along the way, she would take out a booklet, turn her back to Qin Pingan and often write and draw. Qin Pingan never asked about this matter, but occasionally saw Xiego scratching his ears and cheeks there, which he found interesting. If it were a spiritual practice, Xiego would definitely not be so entangled. At that time, Xiego rubbed his mink hat, showing a rare shy look, and asked tentatively, "Mountain Master, I heard that you have the habit of writing landscape travel notes." Qin Pingan suddenly became wary. He couldn't hide something on the hilltop of his home, so he led an army instead. "Speak directly if you have something to say, don't beat around the bush, don't imitate Cui Dongshan," Xiego said in a low voice. "Ha, isn't it because I have seen the wise and thought of them all? I have traveled through great rivers and mountains and I just want to record them so that I can talk to Xiao Mo. Hey, isn't there a saying in the book that it's called being on the scene, describing the state of things, describing the scene and making it lifelike, so I thought I'd ask the mountain master to help polish it up." Like the old blind man, who had studied so much but couldn't refine a single natal character. No wonder they show extra favor to our mountain master. Qin Pingan was a little confused and said oh. He became interested as soon as he heard this. "Can you bring me the manuscript to take a look at?" Xiego took out a booklet from his sleeve, held it up with both hands and raised it above his head. "Show your ugliness, show your ugliness." Qin Pingan took the booklet and opened it. The characters were quite large and could not be written on a single page. It was good that he could avoid pretending to read carefully. "On such and such a day I left a certain city. I didn't know how many miles I walked, but I saw a high mountain. It was really high. When I reached the top of the mountain, when I looked at the town, I felt it was so small. Such a large sea of clouds, snow white, like cotton. Beside a certain temple there is a tree, I don't know what it is called. It looks like it is really not young and it is about to become a spirit. One day I passed by a dilapidated inn and found several limericks written on the wall. They are transcribed as follows." Xiego asked softly, "Mountain Master, how do you feel after seeing it?" Qin Pingan looked calm, but his thoughts were changing rapidly, and he finally managed to say, "The writing is relatively simple. I wanted to add a crude and cute statement, but I really couldn't say it. It was too unconscionable. I couldn't just tell lies just to avoid pouring cold water on Xiego and discourage her from writing and speaking. Xiego nodded to himself and said, "Sure enough, the writer is like a person. Even if he crushes the pen barrel, he still can't fiddle with those fancy contents." Qin Pingan ignored these words and asked, "Why is the article so full of such and such a day and such a place?" Xiego widened his eyes and said, "Do you need to write down the date and location one by one? I don't want to make money from this engraving, so I just want to write it concisely and only the key points." Qin Pingan tried his best to keep smiling. "The important points are all important." Xiego asked tentatively, "There is still room for improvement, right?" Qin Pingan had no choice but to sit on the floor, take out a pen and paper from his bag and help polish the text on the spot. "I'll make some slight modifications. Do you have any objections?" Xiego smiled and said, "Just write whatever you want. The only purpose is for the mountain master to write about me and this trip as well as possible." She squatted aside and saw that the mountain master only thought about it for a moment, and then started writing quickly, starting with the phrase, "I have traveled a lot." When the girl in the mink hat saw this, she nodded gently, which won my heart. The main reason is that the content is also very simple. It seems that the talents of the mountain master and I are equally matched, so there is no need to pay for editing. On the second day of the Lunar New Year, I went down the mountain with my friends, holding a bamboo hat and a bamboo hat, stepping on straw sandals, asking questions with a strong heart, misty clouds and water, and walking freely. 20 miles past the boundary of Qingping Prefecture, the boundary monuments beside the road collapsed, and the mountains and rivers of the continent collapsed. In the past 20 years, floods, droughts, locust plagues and wars in various countries have occurred one after another. The lives of the people at the foot of the mountain are like grass and grass, and it is difficult to say that there is peace in the mountains. More than 20 years have passed by in an instant like rocks, fire and lightning. How dare we not cherish Taoism and accumulate Taoism power? The people's livelihood in Fuzhong City is in decline, the streets are deserted, and the people walking on the streets are many and varied. 10 miles out of the city they stop at a small post. For 30 miles I walked along the shore of the lake, surrounded by willows. I walked in the green shade, crossed the border ridge and climbed the mountain along the Shinto road. The Taoist temple in the mountain was in ruins. I went inside and used the stove to light a fire. After dinner I climbed to the top and looked out. I saw the vast lake and the vast ocean. Qingping Mansion was there. In the eyes the wind suddenly surged and disappeared. Looking back on those days, traveling was very difficult and we often couldn't see the fireworks of the world. It was a common thing to see wolves, tigers and leopards, strange birds and beasts, and terrifying mountain spirits and water monsters. On the early morning of the third day of the lunar month, I hiked down the mountain for more than 100 miles. I stopped at Yangjiapu for a short rest and bought dry food. I spent 8 cents of my money. After crossing the Yuxian Bridge, it rained heavily and the road was muddy. After walking for 15 miles, I arrived at Dumb Beach. When the rain stopped and the sky cleared, I was traveling by boat at night. The passengers in the boat liked to talk about ghosts and strange things, but they didn't know that the boatman holding the mugwort was the person transformed by He-Bo. After getting off the boat and traveling by land for 80 miles, we reached the Huanghuolong Mountain. There were laurel trees along the road. Unfortunately, we were not here in autumn. We met several guests returning from paying incense to the mountain. There was no main peak on the mountain here and each one was respected. I went to the top of the mountain to meditate for a night. I saw the red sun rising into the sky and the river like a belt, which made me feel broad-minded. On the 5th day of the lunar month, I went to Liuhe town and was extorted 20 taels of silver by a local man pretending to be a soldier. 70 miles away I saw a mountain. The mountain was majestic and undisturbed. I walked with my friends along the stream in the mountain, and there were countless fish swimming in the water. There is a careful halfway up the mountain. From then on, the only way to climb is the bird path. It is extremely steep and steep. The steps are carved into the wall and wind up. There is almost no place to stand, so you can only walk facing the wall. On the way, I saw an ancient pine tree with an old trunk like an umbrella, and a group of monkeys jumping among the branches and leaves. Above the top is a flat land with a lake in the middle and several huts beside the reed swamps. They are all people practicing Taoism. Although their expressions are dull and their bodies are withered, their eyes are bright and shining. He asked him about it and talked about the immortals, Buddhas, real people, miracles in the mountain in great detail, and decided to compile a mountain chronicle. With the help of the moonlight, looking at the scenery from the cliff, I realized that the whole body of the Dharma King was revealed in the mountains, rivers and land. On the 7th day of the lunar month, Tianji traveled quickly and entered the mountains again. In ancient times, there was the study place of the founding emperor, and it has always been a hidden place for high spiritual beings. On the mountainside, the climate is like winter, and many beautiful and historic sites are buried in the snow, which is a pity that they cannot be seen. On the 9th day of the lunar month, I passed the battlefield site and saw a Taoist man with a high crown on a hillside, sitting on a futon with his eyes closed. There were 2 white streaks on his nose, connected with the clouds and mist. The wind was turbulent and still condensed. Not daring to disturb him, he stopped 20 steps away. The Taoist opened his eyes and spoke actively, speaking loudly again and again. The Taoist has a kind heart, and when he was leaving he repeatedly warned us Taoists that when we see desires we must stay away like weeds and we must avoid fire when it comes. Immortals are no different from ordinary people. If you know your mistakes you can correct them. If you are sick and sweat you can gradually recover. You must be devoted to the Tao, practice hard, and never be distracted by fame and fortune. Remember. On the 12th day the sun was scorching like a scorching summer. I went to the mountains to escape the heat. The mountains were densely green with bamboos and cypresses, which shaded the sky. On the way I heard the sound of evening drums in the distance, and I knew there was a temple in it. An ancient temple was built by decree of the previous dynasty, but the incense has faded. There are 2 monks in the temple, both of whom look like arhats and have high moral standards. The products in the mountains are barren and life is cold and hard, so food depends on raising money from the mountains. The 2 monks were good at talking about the purity of Zen, and they said that among the final Dharma, there is only one pure land, which is extremely stable and extremely fast. On the 15th, on the official road, I met more than 100 refugees migrating to other places. They traveled together for more than 100 miles and parted ways when they met a porridge shop. 20 miles away the sky was dark and the day was like night. I was having lunch at a liquor store on the border of 2 counties. I met a knight with a sword in the shop. He was tall and powerful. He invited his tablemates to drink. He reminded me that there are so many thieves on the road nowadays. If it doesn't stop, you need to take a detour. The knight-errant claims that he is at home all over the world, and he travels far away with a thin and lame old horse, and his figure is lost. After sighing, when I was paying the bill, I found out that the ranger pretended to be a friend and took the opportunity to get away on credit. I and my friend just looked at each other and smiled, not taking it seriously. On the 16th, when it was dark, we crossed the border and arrived at other counties and cities. The markets were prosperous, densely populated, and rich in products. It was completely different from what we had seen before. I stayed at the Epiphyllum temple in the city. The master of the temple was hospitable to the guests. He personally led the homage to the various temples and spoke sincerely. He said that delusion is like retting in the sea, and desire is like a fire starting a prairie fire. Taoists like us must not ignore this principle and say a few words. Words are the easiest to say and the hardest to do. Staying in the city for 1 day, and on the 18th day I continued to travel far and wide, stopping and walking through mountains and rivers. At the foot of an unknown mountain, I met 3 young people who swore that they would never return to their hometown until they became immortals. Later I saw a tadpole stele with numerous stone carvings and blurry inscriptions, so I stopped to copy it. Monk Yunshui wrote an inscription here, feeling ashamed that he would never see him again in this life. There are rocks standing abruptly like an old monk on the top of the mountain. There was a hut in ancient times, but now there is no grass. Only the historic well remains, and there are still green leek bushes beside it. A single peak stands out from the vast sea of clouds, the mainstay as if the mountains are moving but the clouds are motionless. After Pei Qian finished walking he walked out of the house. Under the clear moonlight, he saw the Xie dog still standing at the bow of the boat, minding his own business and enjoying himself secretly. Xiego looked back at the young woman and made a face at the latter. Pei Qian didn't take it seriously, just get used to it. Xiego crept up to her, raised his hand to drink and asked with a smile, Pei Qian, let's talk while drinking? There are some things that it's time for you to know. Pei Qian seemed to be deliberately evading the important points, with a puzzled look on his face. Didn't we drink just now? Mountain Master Xiegoshu sighed, it's the second stall. Pei Qian shook his head, no need. If Xiego wanted to say anything else, Pei Qian had already turned around and walked towards his house. Xiego hesitated to speak, but in the end he did not say anything to persuade him to stay. She jumped onto the railing, swung her feet and started talking to herself, mumbling as if she was drunk. If you get it at the right time, there will be wild dragons and snakes. If you get it at the right time, you will have great success in the world. Xiego turned to look at the back and asked, I have a question, you don't need to answer it. How have you been these past few years? Pei Qian turned his head, and it seemed that he already had the answer in his bright eyes. Needless to say, life was the best before I met Master. After I met Master, it was the best. Sword of Coming Chapter 1131. Peach blossoms are best seen on the water while boating, and the bright moon can be admired from the rooftop. This is Cui Dongshan's fallacy. Feng Shuetao was like a piece of brown candy stuck to him, and he had no choice but to follow the boy in white around. In fact, Feng Shuetao is not very patient or good-tempered, so he can't do anything with a person like Cui Dongshan. The key point is that Cui Dongshan is still an annoying chatterbox. He didn't have enough wine on the boat, but he was full of words. Cui Dongshan did not lie to Xiego. He indeed went through all the Qi masters who presented their certificates according to the list in the Ministry of Justice's files. The locations for the administrative offices in the mountains have been completely selected, which means that there are more official hats and empty chairs than genealogy monks. The Qingping sword sect is really short of manpower. The main reason to blame is that he, as the sect leader, doesn't have enough prestige to attract all the heroes at once. Fortunately, when we were on the ferry in Tongyin, the husband and Xiego each recommended a Qi practitioner for different reasons. Xiego said that the little girl had decent qualifications, while the husband said that the monk had a good character. After taking Feng Shuetao for a walk, Cui Dongshan has decided to take the young nun with freckles under his command. As for the beautiful girl named Jianxiu, it is yet to be decided. Cui Dongshan asked mysteriously, Brother Feng, what do you think of Kuang Kuei's qualifications? Feng Shuetao, who mistakenly thought that he had made a mistake, used his magical power to take a look at Kuang Kuei. After confirming that it was correct, he gave a relatively euphemistic evaluation. It's very ordinary. Cui Dongshan said, Brother Feng didn't see that this boy has a deep family background and is proficient in Qi gaining methods? Feng Shuetao said truthfully, I didn't see it. Even if you can see it, so what? If the Qi master is good at looking at Qi, it will be the icing on the cake, but for Feng Zuido's level of ascension, Kuang Kuei's ability can really be ignored. Cui Dongshan asked, You have never asked Brother Feng if he has any disciples? Feng Shuetao said, There are only a few anonymous disciples. Most of them have died of old age. There are only a few left who I haven't seen for many years. I have no intention of looking for them. Why does sect leader Cui ask this? Cui Dongshan raised his chin and said, Accepting disciples on behalf of disciples is a nice talk. Feng Shuetao shook his head. It's a mess. What follows what? Cui Dongshan looked shocked and said, Could it be that Brother Feng wants to take over as a master and accept a disciple? Feng Zuido's face was stiff and he said in a deep voice, Sect Master Cui, don't say it's a joke. Cui Dongshan rubbed his hands and smiled. Feng Shuetao asked, Sect Master Cui, can you speak a few words to me clearly? Cui Dongshan clapped his hands vigorously, That's right. Brother Feng, don't guess what I'm thinking, just ask. Feng Shuetao said, I'm all ears. Cui Dongshan said with a rare serious look, Kuang Kuei has a good character. That's what my husband said about him. Feng Shuetao, you should know that when my husband looks at people and says they have a good character, that's really a very high evaluation. It's unpleasant, you won't get this kind of evaluation at least for the time being. Of course you have a similar view of my husband. Next, I will definitely take Kuang Kuei to practice at Qingping Sword Sect, but how to arrange the identity? I have my own plan. If I remember correctly, Brother Feng had an unnamed disciple named Yi. There was a mountaintop in Aii continent called Jie Mountain, which is now Yupu. He had lofty ambitions but was unable to establish a sect due to insufficient military exploits. In addition, he also has a daughter who is a Taoist cultivator and a sword cultivator. She has longed for the Great Wall of Sword Qi since she was young, but Yi loves his daughter and is reluctant to let her go there to experience. Yi ran away from home twice and was killed by the old antique father Yi. After being brought back to the mountains, the relationship between father and daughter has been tense for decades. When the Great Wall of Sword Qi ascended to the colorful world, Yi knew that she was destined to never be able to kill monsters on the battlefield like the two local swordsmen in this life. She was so disillusioned that she even dropped to the freezing point and threatened to give up the practice of swordsmanship. Yi was very worried about this. When it comes to how to untie the knot in her heart, of course, the person who untied the knot must also tie the knot. Yi could first recognize Kuang Kuei as his wife. Personal disciple with this relationship, I can help him introduce a sword immortal from the Great Wall of Sword Qi to Yining and recognize him as his master. But Yining must pay a price that is not a price. He and Jiashan must become Qingping sword sect's enshrinement and descent from the mountain. The price is that he will never have the opportunity to become the founder of the sect based solely on his ability and luck. It is not a price, but because with Yining's cultivation potential, qualifications and connections, such ambitions, this is an extravagant hope. Of course, once we meet, I can make him completely give up and be convinced. Yining has no destiny to start a sect, but at the same time his daughter has a great chance to be there. After a lapse of 2,000 years, the first swordsmanship sect was established in the continent. The Qingping sword sect and I are happy to see this happen. If the Qingping sword sect is involved, then AI Aizhou has never been able to deal with it. Beiju Luzhou, do you have to be a little more tolerant and consider whether this matter is recognized by my husband in Luo Luoshan? During this period of time, which is not short or not long, since you Feng Shuatao, you are the preacher of Yini, so don't expect to stay out of the matter. You and I had a heart-to-heart talk before and I, Cui Dongshan, said that I was a transitional sect master. Aren't you a transitional worshipper of the Yugui sect? Jiang Shangzhen treats you as a true friend, and he is very clear about the habits of xianxia. Yeshio Qingmi is not in line with the ethos of Yugui sect, so he naturally does not want to and will not completely tie you to death in Yugui sect. My husband helped the Qingping sword sect find a secret protector, Qing Tong. Then I, who serve as Chao Qinglang's younger brother, should also find a reliable protector for the next sect leader. After hearing this, Brother Feng suddenly became enlightened. After going round and round, after all the talk, the one I really like is you, fellow Taoist Qingmi. Feng Shuatao was stunned and speechless, as if he was meeting the young man in white next to him for the first time. Cui Dongshan continued to talk eloquently. You may have heard a rumor that the Qinghuang Temple in Haoran Tianxia secretly keeps a separate list to record the famous people who have meritorious deeds. Like my senior sister, whose name is in among them, she traveled to various countries and received special courtesy when passing through the Qinghuang Temple. As for Feng Shuatao, she did not have this treatment. But at the Confucian Temple it was really different just because she once practiced Qingmi in the wild. He once risked his life, first followed a liang to the hinterland of the wilderness, and then partnered with Jiang Shangzhen to protect the path of a group of young people including Chao Ci, and had a close encounter with a monk from the wilderness lineage. But Feng Shuatao didn't do it at all. I know how to take advantage of this seemingly unearned credit, but I know how to maximize its benefits, and in a reasonable way that follows the rules and has no worries about killing the goose that lays the eggs. My husband is a scholar and I am a businessman. My husband is rigorous in his studies and self-cultivation. He wants to combine benevolence and righteousness with merit, but I only pursue merit. So while I am still the master of the Qingping sword sect, you must cherish this once-in-lifetime indulgence. This is a fleeting opportunity. Feng Shuatao, I have made the minimum price clear. Will you do this deal? He'll count to 10 and don't wait until it's too late. When Cui Dongshan was about to count to 10, Feng Shuatao said, I only have a very wild utilitarian question to ask. Cui Dongshan stopped talking, nodded with a smile and said, I'm just waiting for your words. Don't worry, I will help you point out a path to unity. Whether it can be successful or not, I conservatively estimate that it will be between 50 and 50. Feng Shuatao stabilized his mind and asked, seriously? Cui Dongshan said, the ugly words are ahead. It will definitely take you a long time. It can be as short as 800 years or as long as several thousand years. It is possible. Feng Shuatao said in a deep voice, it's a deal. Cui Dongshan asked tentatively, this kind of honest gentleman's agreement doesn't require an oath or a written document, right? Feng Shuatao said, friends are friends and business is business. We have to find a middleman to help witness this. Cui Dongshan asked carefully, for example? Feng Shuatao said with a smile, Zhongzhu Cui is a scholar of heaven and man, and is best at understanding people's hearts. You and I know this well, so why bother? Cui Dongshan stamped his feet and said, I have a normal relationship with the respected Huolong Zhenren. Feng Shuatao said with a dark face, I mean Qin Pingan. Cui Dongshan struggled for a moment, pretending to express his feelings, and then felt relieved and vowed, either way my husband finally agreed. Feng Zuido's face showed sarcasm. Sect Master Cui, can you be sincere and think that I am a fool? Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves and said with a smile, okay, then I will be honest and tell you the truth. There is no business without taking risks. I would like to remind you again, if you dare to threaten my husband me, I will kill you. Good guy, I can turn the page faster than I can turn the book. Feng Zuido's intuition told him at this moment that the boy in white was not joking. In an instant, Cui Dongshan rubbed oil on his feet and was about to run away. In the end, the visitor still held his head down and said with the same smile, Zone leader Cui is amazing, is he doing business with others with such good intentions? Feng Shuatao gloated and laughed endlessly. As expected, one thing fell after another. It turned out that when Cui Dongshan pretended to have a heart-to-heart talk with his husband, Feng Shuatao really told Qin Pingan about the matter, but he cut off the content and only said that he had reached an agreement with Cui Zongzong and was willing to worship the Yuguizong after he resigned. Immediately transferred to Qingping Sword Sect to serve as a long-term registered worshipper. Although Qin Pingan didn't know how Cui Dongshan persuaded this ascended realm wild cultivator, after all, it was a great good thing, and there was no reason to refuse it. However, as soon as he put his mind to this place, he heard Cui Dongshan saying the most truthful words over there. Who was he going to kill? Cui Dongshan shrank his neck and cursed Feng Shuatao as a dog-like wild cultivator. The boy in white was beaten with a chestnut and screamed, and he scolded him, "We are all members of our own family, how can we talk to the future worshipper?" Qin Pingan clasped his fists and said with a smile, "Fellow Qingmi Taoist, please be more patient in the future." Feng Shuatao returned the salute with clasped fists. "That's easy to say." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "In the future when you get to Qingping Sword Sect, you can often go to Luapa Mountain to drink tea and wine." Feng Shuatao heard Xianxi's elegance and said with a smile, "There is no need to complain. I can trust sect leader Cui's business experience." Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Dongshan usually doesn't speak well, but most of the time he is reliable in his work." Feng Shuatao hesitated and said, "I have doubts." Qin Pingan laughed loudly. It seems that Brother Feng no longer regards himself as an outsider. It's very, very good. For some reason, Feng Shuatao discovered that Cui Dongshan was completely different after Qin Pingan showed up. To be precise, when the husband and student were present at the same time, such as at the wine table on Tongyin Ferry earlier, Cui Dongshan would lose all his momentum. And there is no awkwardness at all, just like a silent understanding of the heart. It is natural and there is no reason to say. Qin Pingan said, "Don't talk about him in Dongshan. Over at Qingping Jianzong, Qinglang is more of a serious scholar than me, the teacher. At the same time he is more flexible than me and has a firm heart to learn. I hope Brother Feng will do it in the future. Please take care of me and give me guidance. I would like to thank you in advance." Feng Shuatao hummed, "Here in the capital, I have had several contacts with Chao Qinglang, and I have a good impression." Feeling personally the harmonious master-disciple relationship between Qin Pingan, Cui Dongshan, and Chao Qinglang, Feng Shuatao felt sad in his heart and wondered if he really should go to Aizhou to meet the man who he wouldn't dare to see unless he went there. "Are you looking for your disciple Yini?" Among the anonymous disciples, there are different qualifications in different people's hearts. Some use the tiger skin as a banner to use their own names, while some gradually drift away and become strangers. Since you, Feng Shuatao, don't take us seriously. We don't care whether it is by name or not, but there is also an outlier like Yini who always wants to practice hard and establish a sect, and one day he will prove to the master that he is qualified to be a direct disciple. It seemed that Yini had thought of hiring xuanhuan to be Yin Ying's swordsmanship master. Thinking of this, Feng Shuatao asked, "Why didn't xuanhuan serve as a worshipper of the Qingping Sword Sect?" Cui Dongshan chuckled. Qin Pingan said helplessly, "Maybe Xia Jianxian likes freedom and doesn't like being restrained by the sect. I guess the reason why she is willing to serve as the family minister of the Lu family in Aizhou is because of the friendship with her fellow countrymen." Cui Dongshan was still minding his own business there, but he got another solid chestnut blow. Feng Shuatao felt like he was falling into the clouds, but he didn't delve into the reason. It turns out that Qin Pingan is really afraid of xuanhuan and gets scared every time they meet. This female swordsman from Aizu is not an ordinary person who has no inhibitions about her words. She is also good at talking dirty words while drinking. I really can't find my favorite Taoist companion. In fact, Xuanhuan can make do with it. Don't worry, I don't want a status. I can hide my beauty in the golden house. Don't look at Song Pin, who is so cold and airy in front of others. In fact, when we talk about the boudoir in private, it's all nonsense. Even I can't stand it, tsk. No matter how courageous Qin Pingan was, how could he dare to lure a wolf into his house? Cui Dongshan asked with a smile, "Why did His Majesty the Emperor of Yunyan Kingdom lead a group of high-ranking court officials in an alley and act like a puppet?" Qin Pingan said angrily, "Isn't the alley cooler than the restaurant?" Chui Dongshan's little chicken pecked the rice. Okay. Feng Shuatao laughed it off. Qin Pingan put away his mind and returned to the fly restaurant, where he continued to drink and eat hot pot with Fan Tong and Xianxia. The table next door stood up to pay the bill and left the restaurant, but soon discovered that the situation in the alley outside was unusual. A narrow alley is roughly divided into 3 hilltops. At the front is a pampered middle-aged man with a jade pendant with a dragon pattern hanging from his waist. There were 2 majestic old men standing next to them. One of them had a white face and no beard, with his hands in his sleeves and his habitual bowing and bowing. The other person has a tall crown and ancient appearance, full of Taoism and sharp eyes. Then there were 7 or 8 men with very high official status and different ages, all wearing casual clothes. Further back, approaching the corner of the alley, there were all burly young men wearing imperial swords. Under the moonlight, the cuffs of some of them slightly showed the light of their armor. When the group of people leaving the restaurant saw this scene, they had no choice but to turn around and walk away from the other side of the alley, walking slowly. Before they left the alley, a woman in the team was extremely excited and said in a trembling voice, "I recognize 2 princes in the alley." The other woman was full of energy and said in a low voice, "It seems that there is also the Minister of Rights." As for the several chi refiners, they communicated with each other from the bottom of their hearts. The person standing next to the middle-aged man seems to be the new national master of Yunyan Kingdom. So, the emperor is here in person? You can't just wait for someone? If that's the case, it's strange. Who can have such a big name nowadays? Is it the leader Wei Ying of the Yugui sect? Wei De Jiangxian is so free that he eats hot pot in the same restaurant as us? Is it that sect master Chui from the Qingping sword sect? No, I heard that the sect master is a young man with good looks and likes to wear white clothes. Anyway, they just couldn't figure it out. In the store, Qin Pingan asked seemingly casually, "Fan Tong, do you want to find a job at the foot of the mountain, such as making an iron rice bowl in the government of a small country, or go to the mountain to find an immortal sect suitable for practicing Taoism?" Fan Tong said carelessly, "You can choose whatever you want. The question is who is willing to accept us, Master Qin, right?" Xia Sanyang thought for a while and said, "Master Qin Xian, to be honest, we still want to go to the mountains to find a destiny with the immortal family." Qin Pingan nodded, "I understand." Standing up, Qin Pingan clasped his fists and said goodbye, saying with a smile, "We are full of wine and food. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. See you again if we are destined." Qin Pingan stretched out his hand and pressed it softly to indicate that there was no need to be pretentious and stood up to see him off. "We are so familiar, so don't be polite." Fan Tong remembered something and was about to speak, reminding Qin Xianxia that he had forgotten to pay, and that we had agreed to treat you and you would pay the bill, when the woman stepped on the back of her shoe and glared at her fiercely. The man was a little confused and Master Qin Xian was not short of money. This time he was treating us and we can invite him back next time. Master Qin had already said that they were all acquaintances and there was no pretense. In a quiet alley, a local woman from Beijing who was walking at the end of the team turned her head to look into the alley. She has been in the romantic world for many years and has never seen any scenery or wealth, but she still saw an unbelievable scene that she will never forget. "I remember that because we were sitting next to each other, she and the last man sitting at the next table were sitting with their backs facing each other. Once when she was toasting those immortal masters, she felt that the seat was cramped, and she wanted to remind the man behind her, 'Could you lean closer to his wine table?' But when she turned around after toasting, she found that the man had already moved the bench on his own initiative. However, when the poor man in green shirt walked out of the restaurant, the middle-aged men in the alley began to bow and salute. At the same time, everyone bowed their heads, and there was a faint clanking of iron armor. Zhao Taiyin, the leader of the Danjing sect, is a chi practitioner in the cave realm. More than 100 years old, the man is short in stature and has bright eyes. Commoner and straw sandals, with an iron mace engraved with thunder talismans on his waist. When Zhao Taiyin and his group of chi practitioners arrived at the capital city of Yunyan Kingdom, they followed the little miscellaneous fish in the stream into the Longtan without making any waves, unlike in that remote and small country where they could still be called gods a few times. Zhao Taiyin had a master's property here, and he opened a grocery store in Yilindu. It was difficult to find with twists and turns, so you had to ask for directions. If you ask how the business is, it's probably not as good as the nearby late-night restaurant that sells grilled fish. When Zhao Taiyin saw his fellow merchant who was looking gloomy, He could only comfort him by saying that business on the mountain is always like this. If you don't open for 3 years, you will have to wait for 3 years if you open. The other two groups of Qi practitioners who were traveling with them thought that they could get some credit and find a place to stay in the capital, but they never thought that they would have to find an inn by themselves. In fact, both parties are embarrassed, and it is even more embarrassing to pretend that they are not embarrassed at all. After a few years, the brothers reunited, and xianxia kept pouring out his bitterness at the wine table. It turned out that the high-ranking officials in the capital, not to mention the emperor's relatives and Jiuqing, all had very high vision. Langguan, the threshold is not easy to cross. They don't take the lower 5-realm monks seriously at all. Behind the scenes, xianxia wanted to return to his sect, hide in the mountains and pick up the practice again. Zhao Taiyin was helpless about this and silently made up his mind if it didn't work out, he would stay here and let junior brother Shang return to the sect with the new disciple. In today's world, the immortal masters on the mountain are not rich, but the countries below the mountain are not rich. They are all tightening their belts to live their lives. Several juniors who came down the mountain to practice this time, they started practicing Taoism late and their qualifications are still relatively young. They don't have much feelings about it. They just feel that when they go out to practice Taoism, they should often eat and sleep in the open air and endure more hardships. Master Zhao Taiyin has experienced many blessings. He remembers that when he was young he went down the mountain with his elders for the first time. When he was young he said in Taoist books that the world is vast and fame and wealth are wrapped in turtle shells. It turned out to be all nonsense. When people go to the foot of the mountain they enter a world of flowers. The elders are also open-minded. There is one thing to say on the mountain, but it is another thing in private under the mountain. They are not pedantic and old-fashioned. They just allow a few of them to be more casual. In fact, you don't have to strictly abide by the rules and precepts. You just need to remember to go back to the mountains and don't talk nonsense, lest the Xianglu people listen to you and take the opportunity to make a fuss. Xianxia had a complicated look on his face and murmured, "Senior brother Zhao, how could I have been practicing Taoism in the mountains and become a business?" After drinking a bowl of barley wine, which was as light as water, Xianxia tugged on his collar, shook his sleeves and laughed at himself. "My body is full of copper stench and I can't even wash it off." Zhao Taiyin smiled and said, "This time I go down the mountain, it was the head brother who asked me to take your place." Xianxia glanced at the head lawyer and waved his hand, "Don't fool me with such lame excuses. There is no reason for a sect to open a shop in the market to make money all year round. I'm not complaining to you because I want to go back and hide in peace. It's okay to live a miserable life, but you can't let me not complain, right?" Zhao Taiyin became more and more sad, but he still smiled and said, "It will get better in the future. When the head brother becomes a Jindan Earth Immortal, our sect will truly have a place on Tonggishao Mountain." Xianxia just drank a bowl of wine and said with a depressed look, "I saw a good seedling not long ago. The qualifications are really good. I think they are no worse than the head brother. It's a pity that I didn't fight and let someone else it away. I'm a coward. I don't even dare to let go of a fart." Zhao Taiyin was speechless, hesitated and asked, "Still in the capital? Is there any room for mediation?" Xianxia shook his head and said, "The person who robbed someone was a young nascent soul realm. In fact, the other person was quite kind and polite. Besides, the kid had officially become a disciple, and he even took the initiative to come to me and apologize. He also said send a message to his master that if there is an opportunity in the future, he will definitely repay a portion of the fate to the Danjing sect." Zhao Taiyin sighed. Among the ancestors of the sect, the one with the highest level was Yuanying. It's just that the last time Tonggishao suffered a catastrophe, the entire sect moved to Wuxia Tianxia with the divine master. Zhao Taiyin and the others were unwilling to leave and took the initiative to stay. Except for the senior brother in charge and the senior sister who is now in charge of money, others like Zhao Taiyin and Xianxia were not even direct disciples of the ancestral master hall back then. "I heard that the colorful world will open its doors again in 80 years. I wonder what the situation will be like then." Zhao Taiyin said, "Before going down the mountain, senior brother and senior sister Huang called me. They have made a decision. I want to talk to you and hear your opinion." Xianxia picked up a salted peanut, chewed it carefully, looked sad but said in an extremely firm tone, "No matter what you discuss, I have already thought about it. Even if they return to Tong 80 years later, Yizhou, I don't recognize them as the ancestors anymore. If the three of you want to recognize your ancestors and return to the clan, help me cancel the Danjing sect's genealogy, and I won't go back to the mountain to be looked down upon. Anyway, it doesn't matter if you have me or not. Both." It was before and it will be even more so in the future. Zhao Tian smiled and said, "You are mistaken. We all have the same view as you." After drinking to drown their sorrows and talking to each other, Xianxua's disciple came to the backyard to report the news. A chi practitioner who was out looking for money came to the shop and handed in a greeting card. The other party said that he had a small sect and was proficient in building institutions. Work with the economy to see if there is any opportunity to cooperate with your company. Zhao Tian opened the note box, read the text on the greeting note, and handed it to his junior brother. In the end, Zhao Tian and Xianxua looked at each other, completely confused. "Why don't you find someone with strong family background to deceive you in the autumn wind?" Xianxua told his disciples, "Send the other party away with good words and don't start any unnecessary disputes." Unexpectedly, the uninvited guest had already left the shop and came to the backyard. With a smile on his face, he stretched out his hand and said, "Zhao Zhanglu, brother Xiang, long time no see." Just because the other party was too warm, and the relationship was as hot as meeting an old friend after a long absence. Zhao Tian glanced at Xianxua, and Xianxua also looked at Zhao Tian, thinking that it was the other party's friend who came to visit. "I've seen people who are messy, but I've never seen anything so inexplicable." The young man in white didn't seem to have any self-awareness, with a sincere look on his face. He stood on the patio in the courtyard and talked to himself. It is said that there are 24 pools in the Danjing sect mountain, each named after the solar term. It is really a beautiful place suitable for practicing Taoism, soothing to the eyes and nourishing the heart. What a great place. From my point of view, it's unreasonable not to have a person who reaches the fifth realm. The young man continued, "I also heard that the founder of your mountain was a traveling doctor. He sold medicinal materials in the mountain market. He met a strange person by chance. Because of his kind-heartedness, he got a fairy fate and embarked on the path of spiritual practice. After that, he encountered many strange encounters and was also influenced by it. Well deserved. Until the Danjing sect's incense Taoism is passed on to this generation of leaders, what should I say?" The young man, who was a disciple of Xianxua and also a shop clerk, had just learned how to speak from the heart, and said to his master and the master lawyer, "This guy just stayed outside and squatted at the door chatting with me for a long time. It's hard to tell whether he is a liar or not. Anyway, he has a bad temper." The innocent boy did not dare to say that his peers would praise him as soon as he met him. He was a Taoist immortal who could only be seen once in a century. Why did he end up in the market instead of seeking immortality in the mountains? Such words, regardless of whether they are true or false, are always pleasant to listen to. The most prominent wealthy ministers in the capital have recently led some of their smarter juniors from house to house, and some of them have already recognized several masters. Xianxua also wanted to recruit a few anonymous and cheap disciples, but now the details of the Danjing sect cannot withstand inquiries, and the secrets will be exposed as soon as they are investigated. Otherwise, like those who are in the middle 5 realms, as long as they come to the door, they will not refuse. They only need to teach a simple breathing technique, or teach a patchwork of Taoist instructions, and then give them a few pills to eat the immortal. With elixirs you can make a lot of money. As for this newly acquired disciple, no matter how average his qualifications were, he was still capable of practicing immortal arts. Xianxua was already satisfied that he could find him, which was an unexpected surprise. No matter how patient Zhao Tian was, he still had the idea of expelling guests. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Don't rush to chase people away. In fact, the reason why I came to ask for a meeting is that besides buying and selling, there is also a fate to talk about." Zhao Tian asked, "How do you say this?" Cui Dongshan said, "My husband, along with a woman wearing a mink hat, met you in the realm of the mountain god in a temple. My husband mentioned this to me and said that you have a good family tradition." Zhao Tian calmed down a little. The girl in the mink hat had used some of the methods of the immortal family, and her moral character was not low, quite impressive. If she and the man in green shirt, who had not spoken to each other from beginning to end, were really interested in her own weapon, it would be easy for them to steal it in the wilderness, so there was no need to make such twists and turns. The reason couldn't be simpler. You can rob someone by force, so why cheat? Zhao Tian threw the greeting card back to the young man in white and said, "Please tell me what you want." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "The temple has a lower courtyard, and the immortal mansion has an upper sect. Is this the truth?" Logically speaking, you abandon sons of the old Danjing sect. Even if you are wronged, you still have to bear the humiliation and continue to guard your empty ancestral heritage. When they return later, they will obediently offer it with both hands. It's just that the fourth eldest Yaxing in the Haoran Confucian temple has never heard of the king, the minister, the father, the son. The Yaxing did not teach scholars to be loyal, foolish and filial. If the king is not a king, then the ministers cannot be ministers. This is righteous principles are in order. You need to know that the most fearful thing about spiritual practice is that you are on the wrong path, worshipping mountains indiscriminately, and recognizing thieves as your father. People who practice Taoism have 7 emotions and 6 desires, and they are not sincere and upright. They have thousands of thoughts just like a worm on a lion. You should sort out the rules of the mountain and revive your family tradition. The big waves wash away the sand, and when the sand in the wash basin is exhausted, you will see the real gold. I think you are very good. The upper beam is not straight, but the lower beam is not crooked. This is great. Practice to seek immortality, practice to the Tao, it is still a little different. The body is full of copper stench. How can it be that you are not a Taoist, not just a pure literal immortal? Shangs was said in his heart, Senior brother Zhao, I can't speak to him. Is that guy going crazy with alcohol and talking nonsense? It does not seem. If you chew it carefully, it makes a lot of sense. Zhao Tian said, maybe I can talk to the head brother. Cui Dongshan blinked and looked at the shop assistant. Young man, I hit it off with you at first sight, and I want to help you write a wonderful story about one person achieves enlightenment, a chicken and a dog ascend to heaven. The young man was elated and in disbelief and timidly asked, can I really practice Taoism and become an immortal? Cui Dongshan said with a playful smile, you belong to the protagonist in the second half of the story of one man achieves the way, chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. The young man didn't hear what was said and looked confused. What? Cui Dongshan patted the young man on the shoulder. You are so smart, no wonder we hit it off. Zhao Tian thought for a moment and asked, can you make it simpler? Cui Dongshan shouted loudly, since we are all enlightened people who understand the truth, I will make it clear that I am here today to form an alliance with a brand new Danjing sect. Zhao Tian became increasingly confused and curiously asked the young man in white, may I ask the name of your sect? The boy in white grinned and said, as I said, it's a new sect called Qingping Sword Sect. Shangs was sighed and said from his heart, brother, I really can't stand this kid. Zhao Tian smiled and said, how dare I ask this immortal master if his surname is Cui and Dongshan? The boy in white nodded vigorously, yes, I am Cui Dongshan. Zhao Tian took a deep breath and said, get out. Cui Dongshan turned around and said, fellow Qingmi Taoist, have you seen that you've already guessed my identity? I'm smarter than you. Feng Shuatao smiled and nodded, it seems so. Qingmi? That new enshrinement of Jade Guizong, the Ascension Realm monk of Azu? Indeed, I heard that this old is now in the capital. Shangs was shouted angrily, get out of here. Cui Dongshan gave a thumbs up, you are a man, I won't argue with you. When will we start drinking? Cui Dongshan turned around and asked, fellow Qingmi, it seems that the talks have broken down. What should I say? Feng Shuatao smiled and said, I don't care. You can stay and drink or you can get out. Cui Dongshan clasped his fists and shook them vigorously, see you later. If you really encounter something and are desperate, you can go to the Tongyin Ferry in Yulindu to find someone. Just say that you have met Xiet Zishi, or go directly to him. This is Feng Shuatao next to me. Zhao Tian smiled and said, then my junior brother and I want to see the guests off. Shangs was suddenly said, no matter who you are or what your intentions are, I want to explain one thing to you. Our Danjing sect also has many Taoist practitioners with pure Taoist hearts. Perhaps the worrying thoughts are like those who are not good at drinking and drink a bowl of strong wine. Cui Dongshan nodded, absolutely, otherwise none of you would be able to let me come here and say so much. I'm drinking in vain. I'm thirsty, so we really can't drink together? Feng Shuatao couldn't stand listening anymore and turned around to leave. Cui Dongshan imitated the characters on the stage, raised his feet, held a whip and rode a horse and shouted, fellow Taoist, move slowly. After leaving the shop, Cui Dongshan put his hands in his sleeves and said earnestly, friend Qingmi Taoist, you travel everywhere and travel thousands of miles. We can't just walk around and take a look at the people, events and scenes. It is said that the human body is a small world, with mountains and rivers and wild cultivation. Being alone and without worries, do you really not underestimate yourself? Whether you can meet an immortal, whether you are distracted, whether you have seen the clouds and smoke, or whether you are the mainstay in the middle, where is the heart, leaving people speechless on the beach. The ape is jumping and the horse is galloping. We, mountain climbers and monks, face the wall. Okay, how do you handle yourself? I know you are tough enough to not listen to these words, but as a friend who chops off chicken heads and burns yellow paper, I still want to talk to you. Brother Feng, are you touched? Suddenly you think I'm a weird person? Feng Shuetao said with a straight face, get lost. Cui Dongshan really left alone? Okay, I have the order. I have a little donkey but I never ride it, da. In that long time which seemed like a foreign land to everyone, Lu Chen asked Zheng Juzhong, why do you have to do this? Zheng Juzhong said calmly, Master Lu, do you think I need to threaten anyone with words? Lu Chen pretended to be stupid. Ah? What did Mr. Zheng say? Zheng Juzhong turned a deaf ear. I want to exchange my son with Qingming Tianxia. As for whether you believe it or not, that is your business by Yujing. Lu Chen suddenly widened his eyes and pointed at his face. Mr. Zheng, look at Pindo's eyes and face. Are you sincere or not? Do you believe it? Lu Chen beat his chest and said, it's no exaggeration, I am more trustworthy than you. Zheng Juzhong just remained silent. For a certain chess game that has been agreed upon, the chessboard is the entire Qingming world. Both sides of the game have their own initiative. Zheng Zhezhong's first move was to be the first to reach the 14th realm. The first mover of the great master to teach Koming was a white jade capital. Lu Chen looked gloomy. Isn't it good to educate yourself by yourself? Why take the initiative to join the game and act like a stirrer? Alas, you can't say that. Qingming's world is not a cesspit, and Mr. Zheng is not a stirrer. Lu Chen murmured and repeated, Zheng Juzhong and Qingming Xianxia are naturally not like this. Zheng Juzhong finally said, I remember that in ancient times for travelers and monks, the place where a person was born was called the country of his hometown. The country where he lived and served was called the country of home, and the place of ancestral home was called the motherland. Lu Chen asked, aren't you partial, who are you helping? Or did you reach some kind of secret agreement with someone earlier, and you had to do it as a last resort? Zheng Juzhong shook his head, no. Lu Chen was furious for the first time. He pointed at Zheng Zhezhong's nose and cursed, you who bullies others just because you are smart. Tell me, what are you trying to do? Can you, Zheng Juzhong, be responsible for the chaos in the world? Zheng Juzhong smiled and said, I am self-cultivation. If 3 14th realms cannot defeat Yudo, then what about 3 false 15th realms? Lu Chen continued to curse, what kind of arithmetic? Who taught you? 3 3 equals 9 or 3 3 equals 1? Zheng Juzhong waved his sleeves, Lu Chen, just keep scolding me, don't spit on me. Lu Chen sat slumped on the ground, feeling extremely aggrieved and sniffing. Isn't Xiaodao getting impatient? He can't help himself. Zheng Juzhong said slowly, in my opinion, Lu Chen is the only sober person in the whole wine tank. Lu Chen, however, remembered a sentence for no reason and muttered to himself, I've never been drunk before, so I hate drinking. Zheng Juzhong smiled and said, how about tomorrow? See you tomorrow. Since there is nothing to do today, why don't we have a drink? Year after year, wildflowers bloom all over the world. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.